You're watching the Find the Others podcast, and this episode is with my good friend Gabriel Hardie from the Launchpad podcast and YouTube channel. Gabe is a warm hearted dude with a contagious passion for the psychedelic world. He's the coiner of the term DMT Ninja, which he'll explain in this podcast, host of the Launchpad, which I consider a sister channel to mine, and co owner of Minnesota Nice Botanicals, who I'll tell you about later. I always love talking to Gabe, and he has become like a psychedelic brother to me, so I hope y'all enjoy this conversation.
I felt like it was extra kind of like funny and interesting because of the connection with Trip Whip. Like I met this woman
Yeah.
essentially because of Trip Whip.
Yeah. You
So
should be thanking him. Yeah.
yeah,
I
dude.
I watched the podcast that you guys did, and I thought it was funny too, because you guys, like, on a very surface level, y'all look alike. I know you've probably heard that before.
I have, dude. I think I don't know if I told you this. So, him, and like Rob,
Uh,
the Psychonaut, our good dear psychedelic uncle.
yeah,
It was
Uncle
fucking
Rob.
Trip. That's right, Uncle Rob. It was Trip Whip and Uncle Rob, man. When I was like 18 and 19, I moved into this apartment with my old roommate in college, and we went kind of through our psychedelic, fucking evangelist days together,
Mm.
taking acid as much as we could, and whatever. We're crazy. But shit, what were we talking about?
You're talking about Rob and Tripwhip.
Yeah, we used to sit around for like we loved fucking Trip Whip and Rob, and they were so the whole Launchpad thing, man. It started off as me and my roommate initially like we were obsessively taking psychedelics, really interested in psychedelics, and finding ourselves and trying to like find out about the universe and that chase and digesting all that content. And me and him were both like, dude, we should do this. Like, we should start a podcast. And like we had been ruminating on this idea for like weeks and weeks and talking about it, and like, yeah, we're the best podcast ever. Like, we're gonna fucking do this. And it came to me one day during a psychedelic trip because we had juggled a bunch of different names and stuff around for what the podcast would be. That was like the big, like, in our 19-year-old fucking delusional mind, like, entrepreneurial minds, were like, our big thing was we had to figure out the name, and then the rest just would unfold from there. And during a mushroom trip on our couch there, I had the name pop, like, it came so clear to me, dude. It was the Launchpad. And I told him, and he was like, that's it. The moment I told him, he was like, that's the one, right? And then, like, also during that times when, I think I've told you, like, I was selling psychedelic drugs, and that also, like, bled into, like, me, like, facilitating some DMT experiences and getting really, like, falling into this really weird character for myself at, like, 19. And I, like, at that time too, when all this was like going on, like this apartment with me and my roommate, we're living this lifestyle. I also was calling my apartment the launch pad because, like, I gotta have people over there at the launch pad to, smoke DMT and shit. And so yeah.
That's amazing. I love that your name is so inspired, and that you've been like, this has just been your mentality. I feel like the Launchpad metaphor is so great because I always, I'm a huge fan of like space flight. I used to actually be a tour guide at the Mission Control Center for NASA. And so I would, like,
That's badass, dude.
yeah, the one they used in the 60s for the moon landings, it's
Uh-huh.
like turned into a museum now. And
Yeah.
so I would camp out up there, and then people would come on these tours, and then I would just give them a spiel about 10 minutes long about, like, the history of the moon mission in 1969 and all of that stuff. And so, like, I have all of these videos and images of space flight in my mind. And when it comes to, like, an intense psychedelic trip, like, when it starts, like, the best comparison is a liftoff. And so the launch pad being where you lift off from, like, I just think it's a perfect metaphor.
Oh, thanks, dude. Thank
Yeah.
you. I really, and like the moment it came to me, it was so clear. Like, and I was thinking about it from so many different angles, and to this day, I still do. Like, in what you were alluding to, with, like, I think that the psychedelic experience in general is very much like especially like a certain point, there is this like lift off feeling, But like the vaporizing dimethyltryptamine and getting that route of administration, that very quick onset, that's like so extreme. That to me is like a really pronounced like lift off, like like rocket ride almost. And I was like finding out for myself through like this just crazy like personal experimentation, and then like also experimenting with others, and like, facilitating and having these DMT ceremonies, that like I didn't have any sort of like cultural matrix to work with that had been established and put in place and reinforced for having experiences like this. And so truly, like I've described before, like I knew I was playing with fire, but it's like, there's something here that's super interesting that we're all super interested in, and like fucking like we can go there, and I know it's potentially dangerous, it's psychologically, but it's like, I don't know, dude, it's still to this day feels like this ruthless pursuit. Not that I don't illegally host DMT ceremonies anymore. I dropped that once, I was incarcerated. It's like, that's not my path. But I was like, it was very clear to me, like, I still want to be interested in some sort of way. And so kind of like you is like, I'm just going to like talk about this and try and like find the others.
Yeah, yeah, man. No, and it's beautiful. It's like the friends that we've made, through this process, getting to know everybody that is also interested. Because like I think I might have told you this before, but I'll say it again. It's like when I started the Find the Others thing, the idea was just to find anyone who was interested in the subject as much as I was. And I know they're out there, but for a lot of us, we're geographically isolated, where if you have the internet that takes all these physical barriers down, and you can find the 5 other people like scattered, like think about the Psychonaut YouTube group that we have. It's like UK, Australia, fucking you're in Kentucky, I'm in Texas. It's like, dude, it makes sense that's how far away everyone is. But the thing I was going to say is that what I realized was that I wasn't expecting the Find the Others to mean find other people who are also creating in this space. And then that's what I found was that like I relate to you guys on like a double level,
Yeah,
so
yeah, dude.
it's great.
I remember when you dropped that one video of my top 10 favorite psychedelic influencers. It was very clear to like that what you just said about like find the others. And like I remember, I think whenever we recorded the one podcast that was like on my channel, people should go check that out if they haven't. But it was like we talked about this concept and we looped in the whole theme of like find the others like multiple times, because it's just like super relevant with all the things that we're talking about. But whenever you release that video of like my top 10 favorite psychedelic influencers, what you just said about like find the other creators, and that's another thing that I've noticed with you, and is this appreciation and this curiosity about the artwork of trying to convey these things, because I've always thought that that's super important, interesting too. Like on my hand right here, I just did this secret language tattooed on it, and like I'm, it's right there too. And I do behind me, like there's paintings, and like I'm constantly trying to express this thing that I don't know how. I think it's one of the interpretations I've heard of the secret language is there's a lot of different theories and interpretations, and it's open to interpretation, but my favorite one of it is that it represents that which cannot be known but can only be felt, right? And I feel like that is so symbolic of the entire like the psychedelic experience, right? But I think what the psychedelic experience is the mysterious tremendum. It's the mystical impulse I think is available to damn near just about all of us, right? People have been accessing this in various different ways, but it's been suppressed, right, within our culture through the war on drugs and different various means, propaganda. And it's something that's so inherent within us that it was going to bubble to the surface at some point, whether they liked it or not. And I've talked about this recently on other podcasts about the like 60s LSD revolution. It's like, sometimes I feel like that is like, God's wizardy plan, ninja shit, but also it's like in the random chaos I think also kind of is allowed. It's like, that's so deeply ingrained in us that I truly think to a certain degree too, like, at some point, whether you fucking made these things illegal or taboo or what have you, like I was just going to bubble to the surface. And LSD was like this perfect like jet fuel for it, with its ease of distribution, the scale at which you could do that and turn people on. Yeah, sorry, I know I just brain vomited on you, but I'm really excited to talk to you, dude. I love you.
Yeah, no, likewise, man. What you're saying reminds me of, I'm a creator in terms of like music, and I consider myself an artist, and there's this idea of like the indomitable human spirit, where like no matter how much you back human beings into a corner, we're going to create art and beauty. You think about like some of my favorite music comes from people that have like objectively shitty lives because of like a government oppressing them or whatever. Like one of my favorite types of music is this Brazilian music from the early 70s. They were living under a military dictatorship, and they had to like create lyrics that were poetically like subversive and like secretly taking a jab at this military dictatorship, but they were just trying to get by the censors, you know. And then there's like black music from America, people that are just like completely beat down by society for like hundreds of years, making the most like beautiful, powerful, freeing, liberating music. And I feel that kind of way about psychedelics is like war on drugs, schmore on drugs. Like, we're going to fucking talk about it because there's this thing that we can't contain.
Yeah, and it feels like a portal to feel it, you know, because like I was saying, like you can't be known, like what the particular emotions that is so snowflakey unique to that individual who is experiencing the oppression, like, you know, it's not something that you can, like, as an outsider, that you can know, like you can only be felt. And so all the people within that situation can kind of empathize and they can feel it, like they feel one another, they, you know, but the listening to that music for you, or for like to an outsider, is this potential portal for you to also kind of feel it too, you know?
Yeah.
And that's like what I'm reminded of sometimes when I see like a really, really good piece of like visionary art, you know, like a painting, and it's really fucking spot on. It's like, it's this portal, like, you know, it's like, yeah, like, and I always think of that concept that Terrence McKenna, which ruminated through all of his lectures and things, was like bringing it back. He was so interested in bringing it back, right? And like, how do we bring it back? And I think like part of it is like art, and I think it's, you know, how we like carry ourselves, and like that's art. But like, you know, I think that art is the medium. And I think in one of his last talks, right? Like, remember that one, he was like in like the woods somewhere. It was like one of his last talks on camera.
Right.
He said, like, you know, it's going to keep getting weirder and weirder, right? He was like, it's just going to get weirder and weirder. And we're going to, like, forget, I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but it was like he predicted the meme war in a way, and was like, it's going to bubble out through, like, creativity and art. Like, that's what it's coming through. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's like a Darwinian battle of ideas.
Yeah.
So one of the other ways that I feel like we can bring back proof from the mushroom, I made this video recently about the voice of the mushroom. And then it was kind of a compilation of sorts where like I've told all of these stories separately, like in the context of like a full trip report, but I decided to like list out all of the times that I heard something from the voice of the mushroom. And these are like direct quotes that feel like they're from outside of me that are imparting wisdom that I can bring back. You know, and like one of those things that also ties to what we're talking about is this idea of like knowing our ancestors. That was like one of the first things I ever asked the mushrooms, like, how do I know my ancestors? And I got an instant response that was like, their art. And this also made me interpret the idea of ancestors a little bit differently too, where it's not just genetic ancestors, but mimetic ancestors, where anyone whose ideas that we build upon as creatives, those could be considered our ancestors in like on a cultural sphere level, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So basically, like tying it all together, this idea that Terrence McKenna is talking about of like these memes and this competition of ideas, it's like, we can build on the ancestors. We're actually the first like psychedelic generation that has ancestors because we have the 60s to look back at now. And if we were back then, we were just totally shooting in the dark. It feels like we're shooting in the dark a little bit, but at least we have something that we can kind of build upon. And I think it's cool to think of everything like that in terms of like a legacy. Imagining what kind of psychedelic future we could have, like Return to Monkey. I don't know. That's kind of what I want.
Dude, that's crazy that you said that, because I have a really high dose LSD experience that I had with my best friend. That was the slogan that he came up with in shows for like the entire experience was Return to Monkey. That's really funny. I'm gonna tell him that you just said that, because you're gonna be like,
Yeah, well, that's actually one of my favorite little sub topics of psychedelic experience is the sensation that you feel like you're an ape. And
Mm.
that was one of the biggest things that happened to me on LSD too. On my first time, I was looking at my hands and I was like, these are fucking monkey hands. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
these things evolved to grab trees. And there was
Mhm.
this crazy, like, parallel that was happening too, because I was jamming on guitar, and the neck of the guitar is made out of wood. And so I was like going all over the neck, and I was like, oh, I'm still swinging on trees. This is just monkey business, Like, and
Dude, one time me and my buddy were on 2C and the same thing, we were like looking at our bodies and he was like, dude, if you think about it, he's like, we're just like our our limbs are just like limbs with more limbs coming in, like they were like tentacles. Like it's just like
yeah,
this little fractalization. It truly is like it's like a limb and then like little micro versions of that same limb coming
yeah.
out from that limb. Where there's have you like ever really, I'm sure what you're describing, yeah, but there's been times like on ketamine and other high dose psychedelic experiences where like looking at other humans and or myself, you see like how alien we truly are and how
Yeah.
strange we truly are. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had that exact experience. One time when I was about 19 and taking more psychedelics than is probably recommended, which we all have that phase.
Yeah.
I feel like I was experiencing some kind of like Terrence McKenna, PKD, like this thing where reality was kept giving me these little winks, the cosmic wink, but it would be outside of tripping. And I've always been obsessed with this idea of like knowing if aliens exist, right? Ever since like before psychedelics. And one time I was at work and then I made like a prayer. I was like, aliens, like if you exist, let me see you. And then there was like this, and what was crazy about what happened next was that I was seeing every human being as an alien. So
Oh,
instead of like seeing the aliens, it just made it turned it around on me, and it said, look at these human beings. These are like these alien ape creatures. And
yeah.
it was super fascinating, but very like alienating, and I was getting way too in my head about it, feeling like a monkey might like an ape, which, by the way, for the record, I think is a beautiful thing, that we are animals and we have this like ape-like quality to us. I think that's fucking sick.
Yeah.
We're like cosmic apes, and I think that is a noble thing to be. It's not like monkey in like a derogatory way. It's like, no, we come from a primordial being, and
Hmm.
our curiosity and intelligence has lifted us like above the biological, or at least what we thought were the limits of biology, and it's just
We're
cool.
evolving. Yeah. We're evolving. Like, and we're evolving as a collective. Like, we're all evolving separately, of course, but like we're evolving as one kind of organism in that way as well, too, if you think about it. And like, with the whole alien thing, one little weird kind of tidbit about that I've like thought about in my mind, and I think it's an interesting perspective to have, especially if you're somebody who's like you, who maybe have done DMT, other high dose psychedelics, is like people sometimes say that, well, maybe the aliens are actually like interdimensional, and like that
Hmm.
to some degree could make sense and like might be a possibility, but explaining how they could even get here and how they could dip in and out in certain ways and all sorts of weird phenomenon. But I've had experiences, especially primarily on DMT, where it feels like I've blasted off into some other actual realm or place, and then the beings became aware of me. And
Hmm.
not, there's been times where it's felt like most of it, majority of it's felt very welcoming, almost like we've expected you. But there's been
Hmm.
other times, dude, where I've popped in some places and it's felt like I was either like unexpected or like unwelcomed, or I don't know, bro. Yeah, and like there's also, I was having this conversation with my sister last night. She loves cats. And she was explaining to me this extrasensory thing that cats have like in their fucking head, like where they, and it's part of it has to do with like, if you drop them on their back, they'll always land on their feet. And there's like some extra sensory thing that they have going on where they truly perceive the world fucking differently. It kind of like dolphins with echolocation. And it's this like, and so there's certain animals that can't like sense us and our presence around them. And we're sitting there observing, looking over them, and they're likely in their own whole reality, not even aware that we're right there, and could even like influence and interact with them, right? You know, I feel like sometimes like aliens could potentially kind of be like that. Like it's just they are here, they've been here, but it's like we don't have the sensory, and that's why when people are put into certain states of consciousness, you know, like it's whether through drugs and or sleep deprivation and or, you know, whatever, like it's, you know, there's an increase in the amount of contact with these things. Not that you have to be, people sober report contact as well too, but it seems like there's an increase in contact when there's an altered state of consciousness, right?
Yeah. That's fascinating, man. Yeah, I never really thought of it directly like that. I've always considered, like maybe they're interdimensional, so they pop in and out when they like, but the idea of comparing it to like how even different animals can't perceive others, like, you know, like a snake can only sense like the heat. They're not necessarily looking with their eyes the same way that we do. And I wonder what the psychedelic connection is to aliens, because I have gone through like the ups and downs of being like a believer and a skeptic, and then like agnostic, and then now like a believer again. So I've considered all the possibilities and applied skepticism to it, but now I'm leaning towards like we don't know enough to rule it out. And it sure does fucking seem like we're dealing with aliens or some other type of being here.
Yeah.
And I give it like a 10% chance that it's in her head, but I'm really leaning towards it being something actually there.
And it seems like there's this interesting correlation between what you were describing earlier, but it seems like we're kind of like collectively evolving. We've came from the primates, you know, and that's really cool. It's fascinating. It seems different. We stand out within our planet for that fact alone. You know what I'm saying? And like if you think about it, there's this also interesting correlation, and it seems like, and once again goes back to shit's getting weirder and weirder, exponentially weirder, but it's like as we evolve, and it almost like we're evolving at this really rapid rate right now, as we evolve as a species on this planet, it seems like there's this increase in contact. You know, maybe at sometimes in history it was really hot, and they say it was really, you know, around the time that nukes or whatever, but I don't know, man. It just makes sense. Like, I'm not trying. I guess none of it makes sense, but you know, you know, if you were monitoring and interacting with this planet for some sort of reason, and you also knowingly were making yourself known for a long period of history for certain reasons, certain set of like, what was the reason for that? You know, if you're the ant farm keeper, this thing.
Right. Have you ever heard the Prime Directive? It's like a Star Trek concept.
No. Is it Ender's Game? Have you ever read the book Ender's Game? I think it has a similar concept, but please explain it.
Prime Directive is basically like okay, let's say all advanced civilizations, once they get interstellar travel, they become part of like the Galactic Federation or whatever, and so they're part of like the whole cinematic universe of aliens or whatever. But the idea is that if there's a developing world where they're still in their evolution and they haven't achieved, like, let's say nuclear, or they haven't achieved star flight yet, then the idea is like to not mess with it the way that we treat like those untouched tribes in the Amazon. It's like, no, let's not disturb their evolution. Like, it's like this rule of non-interference.
And so then maybe there's this whole intergalactic warfare of like ones of the, like some of them trying to protect us, and then some trying to like hack the system and interfere with us even though they're not supposed to. Kind of like that goes on with global politics. You know, the rule is that, hey, we're not going to interfere in this country in Africa. But then there's 7 fucking different countries, special forces, bases, you know, spread across it, and it's like, well, they're there under section 127 Echo because of this, you know, the exception. They're not actually working for the U.S. military.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's imagine that same intergalactic like politics going
right.
on with our planet.
It makes you wonder because, like, yeah, it depends. Well, let's say they're aliens, or let's say they're us from the future, which is also like a very likely kind of explanation, especially with the encounters of like the little men and stuff like that. Like, there's
Yeah.
people that have pointed out that as species evolve, and especially when they're domesticated, like you think of little chihuahuas and those little like dogs, those terriers or whatever, they're so like diminished from wolves that they're just like these little baby creatures, you know? And that's the idea, possibly, that if these aliens are us from the future, that we shrink into almost like a more childlike looking thing.
Our eyes
So,
turn bigger, our heads turn
yeah.
bigger. Yeah.
Right, yeah, yeah. Like our kawaii factor goes up through the roof. And it makes me wonder, if it is us from the future, how far in the future is it? And like, have we unified all of society, or will that never be possible? Will there always be like factions and politics and or
Because like
same yeah.
what you were just describing with the sort of I forget the name, but like that Star Trek
Yeah.
theory and idea, it's like that idea itself, it seems to insinuate that there is some sort of like politics, if there's rules that are
Mm.
being set in a way. So if it's a
Mhm.
rule, maybe it is just at that level, it's something that's just agreed on. It's not like enforced. Everyone just does it. Or maybe not. Maybe this explains like all the weird kind of like fucking crazy interactions and then having to like cover ups and then some of it seeming really
Yeah.
planned and coordinated and like
Yeah.
what the fuck is going on? Yeah,
Right.
I 100% think that we have been interacted and contacted with and we probably will continue to, and I think it's probably going to evolve into something very interesting within the course of like, for you and I's lives, just the fact that like, God forbid something happens to one of us sometime soon, like, and I think in the next like 40, 50 years, there's gonna be some really crazy shit with that
Yeah.
happen.
That's like one of
Yeah.
the main reasons I want to live as long as I can, because I want to see like discoveries that we make. Like, I
Yeah.
want to see what we learn about the universe. I want to see if we ever meet aliens. And I'm just like so fascinated by that, because it's just so strange that we're here alone, seemingly,
Mm-hmm.
and it does appear that Earth is like a rare type of planet. Like, most of
Yeah.
space is very chaotic and hostile to life.
It's like this perfect like little womb, and it seems like a womb because it seems like the dressing that's all around it is almost this like also part of like the incubator of it. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm,
it's yeah, it's like the womb, and if you think, it's funny, not that this is like correct, but typically there is this kind of association with like the earth. It's like Mother Earth and it's like feminine figure and like I was saying, it's like the womb, and we, and then the other kind of like side of that is that there is this other correlation, not that this is correct, but this association with God, capital G God, with father, right? And when you're a
mm,
kid too, think about it. Your father is kind of like God. You see as this like large being who you're very much like, don't want to upset him, would love to get his fucking validation. He's going to show me what the world is about. He protects me, provides for me, loves me unconditionally. Your father's like God. And then later, God becomes father for a lot of people. Not that, I'm not saying once again that God is actually all of our paternal father, or, the stubborn, but like, yeah, there is that too, man. That in Earth is very special. I've
yeah,
actually felt that with an experience very like a lot of times, especially within nature. There's this
yeah.
one time doing some mushrooms in one of my favorite spots, like in LBL. Yeah, just sitting out there in nature. I was sitting on this little mossy patch and I was on mushrooms, and like I remember putting my hand like on like the moss, like the earth,
Mm,
and I just, dude, like it was because I started thinking about like her. I know it sounds weird, like Mother Earth, and I was feeling her, and I was like, I put my hand on her. Dude, I put my hand on her. Tears, like, just sort of
wow.
rolling. I just felt her, like, and I was like, I really was like, I love you. Like, oh my
Yeah,
God. Like, I feel you, girl. Like, you were like so fucking sweet. You love us. Like,
yeah,
and um, yeah, and I think there is another interesting thing there with there's this massive correlation between people take psychedelic drugs and their increased appreciation and interest in nature, become tree huggers.
People like you who are interested in expanding consciousness are most likely curious about other modes of altering consciousness, especially if it results in a meditative tranquility. I've been experimenting with these gummies for my friends in Minnesota Nice Botanicals, a company made by people like us dedicated to using nature's magic alkaloids to make life a little bit better. They're well known for their Amanita muscaria, the iconic Mario mushroom whose image is synonymous with mushrooms. When I tried a microdose, I felt more zen. I'm already kind of a relaxed and mellow guy, and this kind of locked me even deeper into that state where it felt like there was no chance of me getting stressed out by anything. They also have powerful plants like kanna, known for its calming mood lift, and my personal favorite, blue lotus, which was used as a sacrament in ancient Egypt. I always say that blue lotus puts me in a state where poetry will pour out of me, which makes it great for creativity in my music and other creative pursuits. It's a subtle, calming, and heart-opening effect that pairs well with so many other things. And what these all have in common is that feeling of subtle euphoria, lightness of being, and generally feeling more chilled out, without necessarily needing to visit hyperspace. You could use these as a way to unwind at the end of the day, relax you into a more creative headspace, or enhance your meditation, making it a good alternative to the devil's lettuce. They have way more than that on their website too, and I'm looking forward to trying some. I want you to know that I take very seriously vetting anything I would recommend to you guys. Minnesota Nice is run by good people. They're fellow psychonauts who get it and are on a purpose-driven mission to share nature's wonders with the world. There are a lot of sketchy products out there, and it can be hard to know where to look if you're interested in trying any of these things. I have complete trust in their integrity and that they're running this operation ethically and safely. I'm sharing this with you because I've been using the gummies myself for months. I like them, and I genuinely think that those of you who watch my channel would like them too. So if you're interested in adding these plant allies to your toolkit, go to the link in the description and use code SAUCE to get a 10% discount. When you do, you'll help support this channel, support my friends, and help yourself. 3 birds, 1 stoner. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, man. That was a huge impact that it had on for me too. Like when I started getting into acid, and it's when that feeling of separation comes down, like that you realize that you are an inextricable part of planet Earth. We're like her little children, and so you feel compelled to take better care of her because we're not treating the planet like as if it were our mother. If we were treating our mother this way, we should get slapped. We should get hyper slapped.
And then like the other side of that, man, that I feel like, and I've been feeling into this a lot recently, like I think the mother needs nurturing in that way. But also the father, a capital G God. Like what we're seeing right now on this planet as a collective is this both really beautiful and simultaneously really nasty expression of ourselves. And that's, I think, something that's that's been hard for me to grapple with. And I think it's probably hard for a lot of other people to grapple with, this idea that's been pushed by different religions and faiths and esoteric groups, and especially psychedelics, is that we're all connected, like all is one, right? And like the hard part of that is like it's super easy to accept when it's all rainbows, sunlight, and fucking happiness and shit. But like there is this kind of nasty expression of ourselves that is going on, and I think that we need to own that, like accept that it is a reflection of us, every single one of us, and I think that is needed for this sort of like healing to come, and I think that really needs to be nurtured as well too, and it needs to come from this very honest place and recognition of that is us. Like fucking it seems to me it's always like the separation of the person. The separation is really what like leads to this constant cat and mouse game.
Right. Yeah, we're very tribal, and I think that we have to kind of like learn. I don't know if it's ever possible to like shed that tribal nature, but you think about it, it's like we're like this for a reason, probably, is that it helped us survive at one point to know who the in crowd was and who the out crowd was, because they might come raid our village or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that tribal mentality is a big part of like the nastiness that we're seeing right now. And I think there's a tendency for some psychedelic people to just want to ignore that and just say blanket statement, we are one. But I think there's levels to it. I think that
Yeah.
on you can like zoom out and say that we're all one, but when you zoom in, you see that we're together but different. We have big differences, and that highlighting that and focusing on that too much is the root cause of like our tribalism. Like people that look a different way, that speak a different way, that have different beliefs. It's focusing on that, or we're overemphasizing that, where it's like, yeah, we
Hmm.
can acknowledge that we have differences and even disagree in good faith. That's another thing that I feel like we're missing, is that like people can't just disagree without like turning it into an attack about everything you are. And I think
Yeah.
we need to learn to do that.
Because they associate so hard with these ideas and teams and things that they're on, and they become a part of. We just saw a lot of that with the last election cycle, of course. You
Mm,
always see that with any sort of like politics. That thing you're saying about like the tribal mentality, and it was this sort of like collective coping mechanism, if you will, that we adapted, and it did help us survive at one point. It's funny to me because if you look, a lot of like the talk about like trauma. There's a lot of talk about trauma, right? A lot of the talk about trauma, and something that I kind of resonate with, and I've even like personally experienced, is that it seems like these dark energies, bad behavior patterns, whatever they are, like they're coping mechanisms that you developed at one point because they helped you survive through a certain state, right? Like in a certain time of life. And a lot of it comes back to like childhood traumas. And it seems like with that tribal mentality that we all express collectively, like there's also that funny correlation of like, it was this thing that we adapted in our more primordial state to help us survive, but now our involvement seems to rely on the like sort of healing of that and the
mm,
but it's also kind of like you just said, man. It's so like it's fucking monkeys, like,
yeah.
because like I can sit here and say all this and stuff, and I truly try and like live my life this way and be like a man of God and practice this. But brother, like, dude, there's sometimes like somebody will say some shit to me the wrong way, and there'll be this spike of anger, and I realize it's like I am, I'm in my ego, like, and we're all not victims of it. We all have it, right? It's the dichotomy. It's what we play in, right? It's a necessary vehicle for every single one of us, I think, in a way. And obviously it can become toxic, your ego, but to
Right.
deny it's there is unrealistic.
Yeah, well, that's if you deny it's there, you're not integrated as a whole person. That's the whole idea behind Carl Jung and like shadow work, is this idea that like humans tend to project evil outside of ourselves. And a lot of times that projection is projection-y, where it's like you say you dislike somebody, but that's like actually something about you that
Yeah.
you subconsciously hate about yourself, or not necessarily all the time, but it's a big thing to like deny that you actually have that same flaw in a lot of ways. Like, oh, he gets angry so fast, and here you are getting angry about it in zero point 0.2 seconds.
Yep.
And the idea is to, when you see evil, is to recognize that you have just as much potential for that. Like all the most evil human beings who ever lived, you got to look at them and say, I have that potential within me. And there's something humbling about acknowledging that shadow side of ourselves, because like you said, we're apes, so we all have something that dark potentially in us. The opposite is true as well, but it's, integrating your shadow is recognizing that, and not trying to project it onto other people. Like, yeah, I feel like it's this humbling thing that happens when you accept that, like, yeah, I have the potential for some real heinous evil shit. I hopefully am not going to do any of that, but it's like the potential exists in all human beings.
Yeah, dude. I had a really interesting conversation last night. I had taken some raw Amanita, which by the way is like when I take like just the raw caps like that, I just crush it up, downed it
Mm.
with some of the zero sugar root beer. Love this shit. And I ended up taking a few grams raw, and it has a good amount of ibotenic, and it's this really kind of dissociative experience. But my sister lives next door to me, and she was like, "Hey, we're having pizza." I was like, "Okay, cool." So I ran over there to hang out with them and have some pizza. And somebody's mom was there, and I live in the Bible Belt of Kentucky. And very sweet, lovely lady, but she's also very Southern Baptist, Christian, religious. You know what I'm saying? It's, if you're not saved by Jesus, you're going to be lit on fire, burned for eternity, like that. And it was really interesting, man, because like we had truly about a 2-hour conversation. It was very civil. It was very sweet. I was super calm, but it was like peeling back these layers of this onion, I guess, together on both ends, right? And like the moment that kind of like had it boil over was I got her to kind of see her own fear of it, right? And it came out in this moment where she was like, I don't remember the exact words, but essentially told me she thought that like I was going to hell. I shouldn't take that gamble with my soul, and she's super scared for me right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, there it is. As soon as that happened, this whole moment with her, and like she really became emotional, and for the first time in conversation, I was like, there it is. I was like, there's that fear, and I was like, you notice how you're trying to project it onto me? I was like, that is what's called black magic, and it only becomes real if I accept it into my heart. I said, if I accept in my heart that hell's a place, and there's like massive punishment, and I like live my life in fear of that, I think I'm manifesting right there, hell on earth. You know what I mean? I think it becomes real in my heart. Yeah, man. And I'm sorry, I forget I was setting this entire stage for the context to loop it into what you just said, but I kind of lost my train of thought.
It was like her projecting that fear outside of herself when she really had it for herself.
Yeah.
That fear of eternal damnation and the vengeance of God. That was one of the things I actually wanted to ask you about, is that one other thing that you and I have in common is that we're in the South. We're in the United States, in the South. I think you're definitely like deeper in it. Technically you're north from me, but like I live in Houston, which is like 4th biggest city in the US. So, but it's still Texas, and it doesn't take me long to get into the Bible Belt type of area. And so I grew up with a lot of that too. So I wanted to ask you like what it's like to be a psychonaut in a place like that.
I love it. Like in this really funny way, like I like being the black sheep. I'm really cool with just like expressing myself, and like people disagreeing with me. I think it gives me a lot of times this opportunity to give people a different perspective and things like that. Truly, I'll find maybe a different, more powerful way to fully elaborate on this and loop it into the entire conversation. But a big like part of what I want to do with my life force, part of kind of what I'm doing with my current ventures and stuff, is I want to accumulate a lot of resources, and I want to start a DMT quote unquote church. I say church with quotes because like it's, there's certain, but I want to create a safe space for people to be able to do that legally, safely, therapeutically, spiritually within the Bible Belt of Western Kentucky, my home, and it'd be emblematic for a very non-dogmatic way that we can sort of replicate this across the country potentially. And also, I think that it's this very sweet kind of lifelong endeavor that I'll have of this, like, developing the relationship and the sort of matrix around vaporizing dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah.
Right. But so with all that said, like I love, and I wouldn't trade my home and like all this for like anything. I love Western Kentucky. But with that said, dude, I have had, just kind of like I described to you, some super heated conversations, and part of that comes from, me, operating within my ego and things. But also like I try and take my ego away, especially like after the conversation, and think about it. Even during the conversation, I try and like collect more data and be willing to change my perspective on certain things based on the data that I'm given, right? But okay, all that being said, man, the culture here with religion, especially like I said, this kind of like Southern Baptist Christian religion, is super, I don't know any other way to say this, but it's occultish, like in this very extreme way. And it's 100% that, because what it does to people at a very young age is instills in them this deep-seated fucking fear, right? And that's it necessitates that for its own survival, right? And now there's so many complexities to this, and like I'm happy to like really unpack every angle of this, and once again change my mind based on certain data points and things. But yeah, man, the culture here with it, like I said, instills this culture of fear. I've had this intuitive feeling because I've been involved with the Baptist church since I was a kid, like a young kid. And I always intuitively had this feeling that the people who were there, who were teaching me about God, who were talking to me about God, who were shaking my hand, telling me I was a good boy for being at church, saying like this is a godly place, I had this true feeling that most of them did not like actually know God, and they didn't actually know what was going on, and like didn't have a way to actually like provide me some sort of path to feeling that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like at a young age, I felt that something was off with everything that I was being told about the afterlife and like what the world was about, and it scared me in a lot of ways. It truly scared me, and that's a big part of where like you see some of like you'll probably see some of the passion and anger that comes out of me when I talk about this, because I experienced fear over this for a long time, and like I know that I've talked to so many other people who have. It truly is this weird occultish thing that we've allowed that is traumatic, right? And I think it's sort of a cycle that needs to be broken. Not that, you know, and people can obviously have their own beliefs, and I think you should absolutely have the freedom to raise your kids how you want them, not how you want them, how you raise your kids how you want to. But with that said, man, like it just, yeah, it's weird. And now I have met lots of Christian people who it's like, okay, I think you use this truly as a modality to like be a very sweet person, better person.
Yeah.
It seems like it maybe even brings you peace, and like I think that's lovely. Like I think any way in which you reach there, it's kind of like the sugar pill, the placebo effect. It's like I don't fucking care how you get there. Like you got there, bro, and like you're playing with the magic that is our fucking reality to get there. And, you know, you're dancing with the smoke and mirrors, but yeah, the culture here, man, is to me sometimes, and since a young age, truly it's deeply sad. I think for a long time I was searching, and it's gonna sound odd, but like, not that I found my answers or like the answer, but dude, there was something that like happened when I had a few of these downloads on DMT where it was like, oh, like I think shit's gonna be okay, you know? Like, I think shit's actually, like, really okay. Like, you know, like, and it drove me crazy. It still drives me crazy to this day to see people who are almost like, who have been deeply programmed. And when you have some of these conversations with them, you see the inner child come out, like I described about this one lady, where it's like the kind of like scared child comes out. It's very defensive. And it's like, yeah, dude, and with all that being said, right, it's so easy to take the perspective of like religion bad, Christianity bad, misrepresentation, this whole mistake thing. But like, I think that it was necessary. Like, I think any sort of darkness, I think a lot of darkness and light came with it, but a lot of fucking darkness for several thousand years came with this shit. And I think all that was necessary to kind of put us in the place that we're at now. I don't know, have you ever heard of the eagle and the condor prophecy, man?
Yeah, I've heard you talk about it. Yeah,
Super fucking interesting. It was put forth in like 1490. It was said that it wasn't put forth in 1490. This prophecy stated that in 1490, right? And it's funny because you think, you know, Christopher Columbus 1492. I know there's discrepancies with that and stuff, but you said starting in 1490, be 500 years split in humanity. Those that embodied the eagle, which is like the masculine, more industrial Western people, and then it was going to be, and then those who embody the condor, which is the more sort of effeminate, spiritual, you know, living in harmony with the earth type of people. There was going to be this massive split. And during that split, there was going to be some abuse of the sort of condor by the eagle people. But, you know, after this 500-year split, starting around 1990, there's going to be a reunion where the eagle and the condor start to soar together in the skies. And like the two different ways of being and living starts to blend into one another. If you think about, like, you know, with the internet, I know it sounds like, but like not even just the internet, but like global trade that's increased since, you know, kind of like the end of World War II. Since the end of World War II, there's been this massive like just interconnectivity of the world in general. And then with the internet of that, it was like now we have a brain that we can all interact with that represents our collectiveness. Yeah, and of course, I think I lost my train of thought with that, but...
Well, I think we do need, like, something like that, and I feel like we're not yet there in striking the balance. For example, you could play out this whole eagle and condor thing in the way that we're treating psychedelic medicines. So let's say that the industrial side of the coin is like the medical, scientific and medical therapeutic model or whatever. Ideally, and then like let's say the Condor or whatever the other one was is like the purely curandero, like Shipibo style, singing Icaros, like this very like artistic spiritual modality. In a perfect world, we would be creating therapy systems in the US and have like an advisory board of these Shipibo elders and people that are in this other world, and asking them like, what's working for you and how can we make it something that fits within our culture, and honoring and respecting their voices as like someone with an equal seat at the table. To me, that would be like, that would be the union of those two things, but we find that one is still kind of winning over,
right?
Or they're just existing separately and we haven't found a way to unite them quite yet.
Your concept there of the elders, first of all, yes, like I agree, and we can let's unpack that one more. I really would like to unpack that one more, but I really wanted to say this. Like, it was interesting you just said that, because recently me and my girlfriend were having this really interesting conversation about abortion. You know, it's a very hot topic issue, and we were truly unpacking it from every which angle, having a very healthy just conversation, open conversation about this. And not saying that this is what we landed on, this is the answer, or anything like that, but we both kind of agreed on Mike. At the time, we felt like Mike kind of be like, oh, this feels kind of right to both of us. Not that we're like trying to implement this, spread this message, whatever. Yeah. It's just our fucking conversation we had the other day. But we kind of had this idea of like, you know, like, people get really in the weeds about like if there's sort of an installment and when that is and all sorts of things. But like,
if there's really sort of a what?
If there's sort of an installment and like when that is, and a lot of the debate around this particular topic can become very spiritual in a sense, right?
Sorry to interrupt, just to be clear, because I think I just picked up what you were saying, like as in like, when does a being become a soul? Type of thing. Okay. Keep going.
And just like this topic in general can sometimes become spiritual in a sense, right? And questions of like that. And so like one of these things that we land on might be a potential helpful with this is having truly like some women like elders, like truly like elders, you know what I'm saying? Kind of like you're speaking of like medicine women, like medicine women who, and it's like, but it's like, what is that even, you know, there's so many questions and nuances to that, you know, but it's like, currently it's like, we are supposed to be a democracy. There's supposed to be a representation of the population and the representation of the collective and what we truly think we should implement and do and how we should handle this. And I think we can all agree on that's some weird fucking game, which like, you know, you don't, and to like get laws passed and to get people in office in certain places and stuff, it doesn't come down to this like the collective truly fairly decided. It's always some weird game, and sometimes like it might win out good or bad. I don't, you know, but yeah, man, I think that women elders, and so whenever you said elders in regards to, you know, how do we like, because that's a good question, is like, how do we build a cultural matrix around something like psychedelic drug use, therapeutic spiritual psychedelic drug use in this Western culture? How do we build a cultural matrix around that which is healthy and but not dogmatic? And I don't think it's like the white lab coat fucking some dude with a notepad asking you therapy questions while you're under the influence. I think if you want to have access to that, you should, and we should set up a really dope market where the incentive structures around it make it very affordable for people, but currently that's not how it works. And I also think that the massive, weird, crazy push, even by some of the top thought leaders of this fucking medical model, is appalling. It's, you know, it's this fucking endless carrot on the stick of, well, we might get this in 2028 in this state for these fucking people. And it's like, that's great. I'm happy that they have that. Truly, I hope they do. But there's motherfuckers out here suffering who need it now. It's here. Yeah. The medicine's been here. And some people don't have fucking access to it because of bureaucratic nonsense.
Yeah.
You know?
That's why I love Dennis's attitude, micropreneur, who you just had on.
Yeah.
Is that he has this like, he has this almost like revolutionary, like guerrilla warfare. I think he called it like guerrilla therapy or something in a podcast, where it's like with mushrooms, it democratizes access because anyone can just grow it in their bedroom. and you can share it with friends, and then there's healing. Maybe that's not a perfect model, but it is a way to kind of subvert like waiting on the lab coats to like push this through. Is like you said, it's here, and we can spread it now, but hopefully with the right information. That's going to be a key part too, because I just had a post where yesterday I posted on TikTok like my friend's idea of the farm boy dose, or my friend Farm Boy Slim. He always recommends like 1.25 grams of mushrooms to 1.5, depending on the individual tolerance and stuff, for like psychological personal work. So like, let's say you have some kind of issue that you want to work out, that's like a solid amount, because you can still get up and walk around, and like you can change your environment if you're uncomfortable or something. Whereas like on the much higher doses, you won't remember as much, just because that happens with the more intense experiences. Like a lot of profound stuff may happen, but your retention of those memories are diminished for whatever reason.
Yeah, I've experienced this phenomenon that you're describing of like getting into certain like, and I think it depends on the individual, right? And a lot of different other factors, but like getting into certain dosage range, like, oh, this lends itself to this, like this is the one, like you said, where it's like I can kind of like maybe unpack some of like the reason why me and my girlfriend just broke up or whatever, and but this dose is going to be like I'm going to be thinking about like my mortality, and there's this pretty like of course every experience is different, but there is this kind of these ranges where it's like I have somewhat of a feel of like where this goes to, and I found that and it's gonna make me sound a bit like drug nerdy or whatever, but like I find that best with synthetic compounds, like things like 2CB or ACO, LSD, where it's like, and of course with some of these things, especially black market, it's like, of course you always want to test your shit, and something like LSD, you don't know that everything's dosed correctly, especially if you're getting something like tabs and stuff. But there does seem to be more of this like pretty reliable, especially if you get a good batch of something. It's pretty reliable. Like, all right, this is what 30 milligrams of this batch of 2CB takes me to. And it's like pretty fucking reliable. Whereas like, unless it's even the same batches, man, of psilocybin mushrooms, that like content variation within psilocybin mushrooms, how like, and it varies by strain, but you can grow the exact same strain, and like if this batch varies and how is more potent, and it's so that itself, like I love mushrooms, and there's something so special to like that full spectrum experience, I think, and like everything you're talking about, Micropreneur, the connection to the mushroom. Like I have a mushroom on my neck, like I think the mushroom is like my friend. I've come to accept, unless it's truly like I've gotten acquainted with a certain batch, or it's like really a smaller dose range. Mushrooms to me are kind of like, all right, I'm sending it, and there's this variation in like potency, and like this one's gonna be really heavy, like a really heavy body load, and that's okay because I'm at home just chilling. But like, I really like what he was describing about like 2.5 to 1.5 though, because I would say for like what most people probably describe as like averagely like normal potency shrooms, whatever that is, I would say 1.25 and 1.5 is right on par with like what I experience as well too. It's usually right around the amount I take if I want to think something through while on a hike. If I want to have a kind of mystical experience, really fun day, fucking type of hike, I'll take 2 to 3. I'll go further. But if I really want to just like unpack a specific thing, or like really unpack maybe some emotions, if I can feel that kind of like, ooh, maybe this is like a purge of emotions day, dude, like 1 to 1.5 grams is where I'm at.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, everything you said was spot on, and that was one of the things that came up a lot in the comments of this video, is that like you had a lot of smart people who were saying, well, like, hold up, strain makes a huge difference, because like 1.25 of apes or PE is a totally different story.
Dude, 1.25 of apes is like fucking 4 grams of some regular. It's crazy. Yeah,
I haven't tried it, but I believe it because I've had experience with PE, and that's so totally true. So I feel like that's why it's hard to give these like blanket like little rule of thumbs, but in my mind it was the assumption that I was speaking of like your average cube or like golden teacher, but things are a little bit different now. Like within the last 5 to 10 years, there's been like this new like rapper weed strong mushrooms that are coming
Yeah,
out,
dude.
you
I
know?
saw this in an article recently. I think Micropreneur had written it as well too. So I think I saw it through like his Instagram account. But the title of the article is like mushroom strains are getting stronger, and it was like
Yeah,
yeah, like and this happened like you said with cannabis, where it was like this was already happening historically for quite some time, and like especially once it became like this more of a commodity around like the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It was coming along then. But once it really became like a thing and legalized and a giant market, it was like, yeah, the massive spread of that market and all the money involved and all the incentive structures involved really did breed for this. Like, dude, you have weed nowadays. With the whole THCA loophole, I have
hmm,
weed at a gas station 1 minute down the fucking road here in rural Kentucky that has, not gonna lie, not bad priced fucking flower bags, quarter flower for $50, right? There's not this crazy tax on it. And it's like, they say, on the bags, like 27% THC or whatever. You never really know. But dude, the nugs are like fucking shatter. When you break it
right.
up and like it's not sprayed. Really don't think it's sprayed. I know and know what that looks and all that looks like. It's just really good fucking resiny, potent weed. And it's
Right.
like this shit's everywhere because of the market. And like the
It's
same thing is happening to mushrooms.
yeah, and the THCA is a total loophole for anyone that is listening who doesn't know. THCA is like one of those pro drugs where basically it turns into THC as soon as you consume it. So that is the case for THCA, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's
Okay.
it's any THC. Like when you go, it's like this has this amount. If you go to like a dispensary in say Colorado, it's
Hmm.
like this amount of Delta 9 THC. Like what that is Delta 9 THCA, and when you smoke it,
Mm,
yeah, it's decarboxylated.
right.
Yeah, like and that's the funny loophole, and that's why it is just regular weed. It's like you don't have to.
Yeah.
We didn't have to like all right, now this is the strain that's showing some Delta 9 THCA, and then we're going to like selectively breed this for a while and or isolate the Delta 9 THCA, and that's the only product available. It's like, no, the loophole is that you can just sell the regular weed now. It's
Yeah.
THCA,
Right.
it's really fucking fascinating. It's funny. It's funny.
Yeah.
But
I know.
yeah,
It's a weird time.
it's a really
But
weird time.
this idea of like products, it leads me to one of the things I wanted to talk to you about because I'm sitting right here and I got something that you kindly sent me in the mail. This is the pineapple Amanita pantherina. So you sent me that, and then I got the canna,
The Kana gummies? Okay.
yeah, and then the blue lotus. I crushed that bag. That one's already gone, and then
I'm
I
gonna
have
get you
that.
some more, bro.
I love the
Say
Blue
less.
Lotus. I tried Kana. I tried it for the second time like a couple days ago, and it was nice. I find that like similar to Blue Lotus, if you're like really stoned, it can kind of even just be like so subtle to where you can't really tell, but you generally, I'm like, oh, I feel like really relaxed right now.
Yeah.
And with the Amanita, I've honestly been a little scared to try it just because I've never had it before. So
Hmm.
I understand, like, I've heard you say it's like dissociative and helps with sleep. So I'm like, what does that mean?
Sure.
I'm a curious. I would like to hear you describe Amanita, like the subjective effects, and then I want to hear about your philosophy on like doing business per
Yeah.
se in the psychedelic world because there's a lot of controversy about that sometimes.
Dude, I just want to say like thank you for asking this question because I'm like juiced up, excited to
All
talk
right.
about this right now. But so Amanita, man, like okay, and it's funny that you say that I'm scared to try it. And like I think with anything that you should take, especially psychoactives, anything that you take, you should I don't think be scared, but you should of course like approach it with respect and educate yourself and understand it kind of like you are right now. But it is emblematic of that thing you said. And Amanita itself is very emblematic of this. Even within the psychedelic community, the esoteric community, there's still good amount of programming that we're like working through and stuff. And Amanita is emblematic of that. And it's because it's the most famous iconic mushroom in the world. Like if you go to TJ Maxx, there's fucking me and my girlfriend actually did this recently. Before we walked in. It's like as we were walking in, this lady was walking out. She had an Amanita on her shirt and my girlfriend was like, "Oh, you know, it's the most famous mushroom in the world," making fun of me and stuff. And I was like, babe, I'm telling you, I bet we will find at least 20 Amanita things in here. And she's like, okay,
Yeah.
let's. And so we started counting. It was like more than 30 between like fucking like hat, like it was like t-shirts, and there's like some lamp things, and then there was some
Yeah.
mugs, and you know, there was like this one that had Amanita patterned on a blanket somewhere. It's the most famous mushroom in the world, but it seems like crazily, even within the psychedelic community, a lot of people don't understand it. And but there's while they simultaneously don't understand it, they've also had this association with it that it's toxic or poisonous, right? And with that, truly, don't get me wrong, it's like anything else. If you really approach this recklessly, it can put you into some bad places. And I'll explain all of that. It's about as toxic or poisonous as like a chicken breast. You know what I'm saying? Like if you were to eat a raw chicken breast in a large quantity with no sort of tolerance to that, you're likely to get, you know, sick. And so there's thousands of people that die every year from like going to Arby's and having uncooked meat and they're, you know what I'm saying? Like that shit happens a lot, right? But we don't say, hey, meat's bad, stay away from it, it's toxic or poisonous. It's like, hey, here's this thing, here's how we approach it. We try and prepare it correctly. You know, and with Amanita, these scare stories that have stemmed from that, really where most of that comes from, I think there's a level of like truly like kind of like governmental conspiracy like things involved, but like where the scare tactics and stories come in with that of being told it's toxic and poisonous is from people who have like sort of unknowingly and willy-nilly taken like it straight out of the ground, large doses, they don't decarb it at all, which that's another area that we'll unpack with the Amanita thing. But when you do that, yeah, man, you can get a large amount of something which is called ibotenic acid. And large amounts of ibotenic acid can potentially lead to things like sweating profusely, vomiting, delirium. There's people that have been hospitalized into comas for it before, taken like really massive, like ungodly doses that were raw. You know, it's kind of like you can put yourself into a truly psychotic state that lasts the rest of your life from edibles too. There's dangers to a lot of these things, right? But whenever you properly prepare this mushroom and aren't taking ungodly doses, it seems not only like incredibly safe physiologically, like you're not going to overdose or die, but it seems to have these really unique sort of experiential effects, these really unique sort of health properties. And yeah, man, it's a legal mushroom that's available in every state except for Louisiana, and it's available in most countries around the world. There's a handful that do have it outlawed and stuff, but yeah, the really there's so many fucking aspects of this mushroom that are interesting that I want to like unpack with you. But like, so experientially, at like the lower dose level, it is from the bottom of my fucking heart. Put this on my kid's head, dude. It's the best thing I've ever found for sleep. In terms of like, you know, I've experimented with a lot of different supplements. Overall, I think regardless of what sort of supplement you're taking or Amanita, you should have good sleep hygiene to help with that. You know what I'm saying? There's all different sorts of facets to that. And I do all that, but sleep is something I've struggled with since I was a kid, since I was a young kid. And Amanita reliably gives me this very deep, restful sleep where I have these very vivid dreams. And sorry, I was getting a call on Instagram. I had to close that out. But it, you know, it gives me this very reliable, deep, restorative sleep where, like, you know, there's a lot of things that you can take to sleep. Melatonin, sometimes a cannabis edible, sometimes alcohol, Xanax, like things that will help you go to sleep and maybe even stay asleep. But like you'll wake up and you'll feel like groggy or like kind of like you didn't really. Dude, like Amanita is not like that. Like it truly feels like you're in, and it makes sense because there's this super commonly reported thing of people saying, I have crazy dreams on Amanita, like spiritual DMT like dreams, and I can second that. Like, and it would make sense from a physiological standpoint that if you're dipping into this certain brainwave state, that you are reaching those. That's where like a lot of the REM state is where you reach a lot of those sort of memory processing, physical restoration, things like that. So yeah, it's giving people very, very deep restorative sleep. On top of that, if you find and you titrate your doses and you take the right amount, you can take it during the day, and it provides this very just like flowy, functionally, like it's very good for anxiety, and it puts people in the flow state very easily. And now with that, like with all of this said, I truly think that you can develop toxic behavior patterns and become a quote unquote addicted to just about everything. I think if you were taking 30 grams of Amanita tea every night to sleep, you know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden, like you stop, like you might have trouble sleeping for like a couple weeks or some shit like that. And maybe even, you know, but It's I think that, sorry, I lost my.
Quick question for you, man. So let's say I have one of these
Hmm.
Minnesota Nice gummies.
Yeah.
What would be a small dose or a medium dose or a big dose with like one of these
Hmm.
gummies, like a regular Amanita?
Yeah, I guess what I was going to say with all that is that from the anecdotal data that we've collected from, I mean, there's pharmacological and physiological aspects that would kind of hint towards this and explain parts of this. But Amanita doesn't seem to be very addictive, like,
Mm,
for the most part,
nice.
for most people.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, with the gummies, so the gummies that you have there, the Amanita ones, we don't currently have those ones in stock right now, but I
Hmm.
sent you those ones a while back. Those are Amanita Pantherina gummies that we
Right.
had. We're working on possibly bringing those back. We might do Regalis gummies. But so Amanita Pantherina is a strain of Amanita. So Amanita muscaria, it's, the red top one with the white dots.
Mm.
Amanita pantherina is like a tannish topped one. And it has a very, very similar yet slightly different sort of like chemical composition. The primary drivers of Amanita pantherina are the same things, muscimol, ibotenic acid, and muscarine. But there's other unique compounds within Amanita pantherina, kind of like pantheric acid and some of these things that they're trying to like discover what exactly they do. And it seems like within Amanita pantherina, there's generally sometimes higher concentrations of like the muscarine, and different regions of Amanita muscaria alone feel different. But the big thing with Amanita pantherina is that, once again, this isn't a perfect analogy, but it is pretty accurate. I feel like they say it's like 3 to 4 times as potent as Amanita muscaria. And so with those gummies that you have there, we say that like our gummies, and they really are like microdose gummies. I believe, are those 350s or 700s?
Let's see. I also have the regular Muscaria one. Yeah, 350.
Okay,
Yeah, both of
yeah.
mine.
So 350 milligrams would mean that there's 0.35 grams of extract worth in there. So
Hmm.
like extract equivalent to fruiting body. So that would be equivalent to 0.35 grams of fruiting body. Like, so that would be like you're taking a little less than half of a gram within one gummy. But mind you, since that the pantherinos are said to be about 4 times more potent, it's like, let's go ahead and say that this is capping off somewhere around like 1,500 milligrams, like 1.5 grams or so, somewhere around there, right? Yeah, when we have a basic sort of microdose range, but this is another interesting nuance and aspect to Amanita, and that we try to truly be transparent about and like educate people on and empower people on. Is like, it would be disingenuous for us to say like this is the microdose spot. It just, because of these nuances with the different regions, the different
Yeah.
strains, the different potency. Also, it seems to vary quite wildly for people, even if you are taking the exact same strain together. Whereas, like, some people might need truly like zero point 0.2 grams to get to their desired microdose. Honestly, dude, I kind of like a gram or two. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? For my microdose, and that's
For the
just.
regular Muscaria?
Yes, yes. That's actually, we have some Carpathian close caps in right now that like are that's my favorite batch of Amanita that we've ever had. And so what I'll do is I do munch on those raw a little bit throughout the day. I like the ibotenic.
Hmm.
There's something, so this is part of it. Like I said earlier, there's those three main alkaloids that are kind of thought to primarily contribute to the psychoactive experience. That's muscimol, ibotenic acid, and muscarine. Muscimol has this more of an affinity for your GABA receptors, and when you take muscimol isolate by itself, you feel that, and like it has this relaxing sort of sedating effect. Whereas ibotenic acid, it's more glutaminergic, and it has this glutaminergic response similar to something like ketamine or something like that. And
Okay.
so at low doses of that, it can actually be quite like stimulating and help you focus a lot. But then when you take higher doses, that's where I think a lot of like the mystical aspect of Amanita comes in. Truly, not like, I think it's that in combination with these dream things, man. Like
Hmm.
it's the full spectrum of it. So I think the ibotenic thing is an important aspect to talk about with all of this. But when you take larger doses that are raw of the ibotenic, I've had experiences, dude, that are like in terms of intensity and weirdness, it's not the same thing, not the same sliver, but it's like a similar sliver of the universe, like a K-hole. You know what I'm saying? But with like on Amanita, it really is the kind of like nature's unique dissociative. But mind you, that whole thing is built into the spectrum of like, it's also got muscimol in it with the GABA, and then the muscarine is playing on your acetylcholine receptors, so it has this nootropic-like effect. Likely, of course, there's a lot of money that needs to go into, you know, really map some of these things. But if pharmacologically speaking, it's not incorrect to suggest and theorize that that could be what's going on. It's to point towards that. It would make sense too. The muscarine, you know, there's individual studies that have been done on muscarine, and some ones that are starting to come out that are interesting that one of my business partners was showing me the other day. But yeah, he's playing around with this little tincture, the thing that he has, this spray, and some of the formulations that he's made have higher content of muscarine. And he had this particular person who was buying his Amanita spray from him. Mind you, he keeps the full spectrum of alkaloids within there, but like kind of titrates and mess around with things. But so he has the muscimol experience and just the plant medicine magic of nature's intelligence, but also he had something with muscarine, and he was like, I'm going to increase the muscarine. And so he increased the muscarine in one of his bottles for him, and it seemed to work more effectively. And yeah, so like these alkaloids are like super interesting on their own, but the fact that it comes packaged into this little nature's, you know, umbrella thing. And then of course there's all this crazy historical significance with Amanita of like, okay, it's like I said, it's the most famous mushroom in the world. It's burned into our subconscious. We're extremely interested, and just kind of a lot of people know it. And it seems to be depicted in like a lot of Christian artwork and things like that. And yeah, dude, it's like there's been archaeological data suggesting within like certain chalices and things like that like people have been using this for thousands of years. There's caveman paintings, you know, with like them painting Amanita muscaria on the fucking cave walls.
Yeah,
you know, it's like, yeah, this seems to go deep. With this, strike something deep within us, you know.
Yeah, I love to hear your enthusiasm about it. Do you still have that mug?
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now?
yeah, dude.
Let's see the mug.
I think it's actually a Mickey Mouse mug.
Okay.
But I saw it at the store and I just picked it up. I was like, oh, Amanita, but I'm pretty sure it's Mickey Mouse mug. But I do have a Amanita mug that my mom got me last Christmas. It was a really sweet gift. I was like, that's thoughtful.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's a cool like lane kind of that you found for yourself. I one of the things that I focused on when I was making that top 10 psychedelic YouTubers is like everyone's individual kind of lane and identity within the psychedelic world, because I think we all have like our own specific interests, also our own specific skills, and we kind of find the zone there where we kind of find our lane. So I wanted to ask you kind of like, what are the subtopics of the psychedelic world, like Amanita being one of them, that you want to like continue to further and talk about?
Yeah, man. Honestly, it's part of like, I think we brushed up against this within this conversation today, but yeah, I would really love to kind of like build some sort of, not in a very non-dogmatic way, in which that's the weird game to play. It's like, how do you know, but build some very sort of like cool matrix around the vaporization of dimethyltryptamine. And I think that I really feel this kind of like calling to that in this weird way. On top of that, you know, being involved with this company, Minnesota Nice, and now being, you know, a part owner of it and like being involved in like this vehicle, I've really found like, and I've learned through all of it that like my business, you know, isn't like some particular company. It's not like the thing that I'm working in or whatever. Like the business that I do is like, how the fuck do I build a matrix around myself where I get to like contribute what I think is meaningful? It makes like the best sort of like positive ripple and use of like, you know, my life force. And I've really found this like deep passion for like business in this weird way, you know, by being a part of this company. And so like I'm really like just looking forward to that, honestly, being involved in sort of like psychedelic industry, if you will. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so many, that's a trope in and of itself, the psychedelic industry, but it's coming and it's going to be here.
Yeah. That was one of the big things I wanted to talk to you about too, is this idea of like entrepreneurialism in the psychedelic world, because there's a very mixed bag of reactions to that. Like I don't know if our friend would want this to be like publicly named or whatever. Let's say a very well-known psychedelic YouTuber that we both know posted on his community tab on YouTube that he was selling t-shirts, and there was like a huge backlash. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I don't.
Okay,
I guess I missed that chat.
Oh,
In our
okay,
chat.
so I'll cut this just in case, like, but it was Vivek. He posted fucking Vivek shirts, and there was like a huge backlash to that.
I want a Vivek shirt. Fuck that,
I know.
dude.
I literally bought one.
I'm gonna hit him up and ask if I can buy one. That's cool, dude. I want a Vivek shirt. I've seen him wear one. I think he wore one in our podcast together, maybe. I've seen him wear one recently.
I have one somewhere. It's lost somewhere, but anyway, I don't know if he wants us like airing that out, so
yeah, we can.
I'll talk to him first, yeah, and then if we need to, we cut it. So there was like a huge backlash, and I feel like there's this weird idea from people that identify as spiritual that like anything material is like missing the plot entirely. And I think that is, I actually understand, like I've had that mentality before thinking about people. I'm like, oh, they're just like profiting. But like on the flip side, it's like we need to survive somehow. And it's like, also it's totally optional for you to buy that shirt. Like it shouldn't affect you. Like if you don't want to do that, then you don't do that. But like it's not wrong for somebody wanting to like give their fans an option to like represent this thing that they like, you know, like this is a band t-shirt, this super sick alien UFO head. It's a musician called Chris Dave, who's like this amazing jazz drummer, and I love rocking this thing to show my support and, you know, and also fuel this person's career. So I just wanted to like get your opinion on like what is it the correct mode of like, if you are gonna, you know, just because you have a business doesn't necessarily mean you're like an extractive scum of the earth, you know, which can happen, but like there's a good way to go about it. I want to know your thoughts on all of that.
And it does happen a lot too, and that's the big thing, and like that's the reason why it's real. You do see that a lot, people who are truly in it for greedy reasons, and it comes back to this word that we love throwing around a lot, but like the intentions of it. Like what are your intentions? Like truly, man, like truly in such an intimate way. Like I trust myself, and I've like, you know, me and Christian truly like Minnesota Nice is this like sacred vehicle thing, and like I said, I trust myself, and I remember in this very weird sort of like real ritualistic way, while I was on a high dose of mushrooms, I told the universe, I made it very clear. I was like, yeah, I've had this like very kind of like entrepreneurial, like go get it spirit since I was young, and I started implementing that when I was like 18. But I made it very clear in this like ritualistic way. I was like, if you gift me with a lot of resources, I was like, I will do awesome things with those resources, and made it like very clear, like what I was going to do, you know? And then it was shortly after that, Christian, who at the time I was working for at Minnesota Nice and had been working for quite some time now, you know, in like the short period that I worked with him, I was able to help him grow the business, like, and acquire a lot of new customers and make a lot of money. And me and him bonded really extremely, and truly see him as like a soul brother. And it came to him in an Amanita experience. He was like, it's very clear to me. He's like, I just want to give you a chunk of the company. I'll be honest, man, like when he said that, I was like, wow, like this is like literally like life-changing. You know what I'm saying? Like financially life-changing. And I just did this whole ceremony about like, if you give me a lot of resources, I'll do awesome shit with it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, I think that I don't think I fully have like the economic built mind to have the argument about whether or not capitalism is good or not. You know what I'm saying? I truly get this feeling of like, kind of like I was saying earlier, when it's done right, it's this potentially very beautiful vehicle. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, dude. And I think that, and because of all of that I was describing, like there's going to be a lot of players within this field who are coming from this very raw, authentic place with great intentions, who are truly trying to do great things with their money. And then there's going to be a lot of people who are in it for just the money. And that's part of the reason why I love micropreneurs so much, is because he's so good at like making fun of the entire thing and like being involved, but also making fun, which I think is so healthy. Like you can't take yourself too seriously. You know what I mean? But an interesting thing about all of this is that, you see this massive rise in this esoteric or psychedelic industry. And I was talking about this with Micropreneur, and I think that it does. I think 100%, man, it does come from this place of like people want to help other people and they feel like they have this mission and this greater purpose and things like that. But I'm fucking telling you too, Tyler, like me and Mike were really unpacking this psychologically. Part of this is that when you start to have some of these mystical experiences, and go to these places and you start to really get the perspective shifts and breaking some of these thought patterns and programming, a lot of times what happens is people see the inherent flaws in the sort of like system that's been built around us and that we grew up in and things like that. And there's this real true desire within people to escape that. And it's like, what's the best way to escape that? And that's to make money doing what I love and care about, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of times people get caught in the trap of thinking that they're actually trying to like provide value and do something good for the world, but truly most of it actually stems from is this just desire to make money off of it, but yeah, it's a really, I think that a lot of people deal with like me myself, I've dealt with imposter syndrome at times, but I think if like ultimately you have to ask yourself with everything that you're doing, I think, there's a sort of like, it feels like field that we operate in, and you can feel energetically when there is or when there isn't a fair recidivism of value,
Yeah. No, that's totally on point. And it's funny that you cite your mystical experience as being like the thing that made you conclude that you want to like get out of the system by doing your own thing and making a living off of that. But it's funny that someone can have that same mystical experience and come to the opposite conclusion that no, we need to actually reject all of these forms of money and like because think about the hippies. There was communes. There's something that comes with the deconditioning that for a lot of people means just outright rejecting everything about how we operate today.
Yeah.
And like doing like a barter economy or something like that. So I just find it interesting that you would come to a different conclusion, but maybe that's a thing where it's like these are non-specific amplifiers.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up. That's a very interesting point. Who was I unpacking? I was talking about this recently with somebody, but like what you just said, I've experienced this, and I think I even described this to you earlier in the podcast where I was like, I've had the temptation to be a digital nomad and stuff.
Yeah.
So what was I talking about?
You were just talking about like we were talking about the different conclusions people come to, and you said you were talking to somebody else about that. Like,
oh, okay. Yeah, and I see this desire, and I've even felt it many times of like, we live in this kind of like, I think Terrence McKenna said this one time. He's like, to, essentially like not be insane in an insane world. Like,
yeah.
To remain sane is going to require this certain degree of separation from all the insanity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think an important part of what he said there was like a certain degree of separation. Because I think sometimes people are very compelled by the full separation, like I'm just going to like fully self-act, and I see that, and I think that if that's the path you're on or you're going to do, like that's part of the whole collective, and that's just as important as any other path. But dude, I've had this feeling, and this is I feel like part of the dance and the art of the whole like this sounds weird and douchey, but like techno shaman, just like and it's like if we can go to like the mountaintop, but like when we come down off the mountaintop, like what are we doing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I feel this need, and I see this like after I've gone to some of these places, I have this deep desire to ground some of these things, and you've seen that come out throughout this podcast, and to ground these things into reality. For this, that truly requires, I believe, a certain degree of participation within the collective, right? And the collective itself, at this point, like we've talked about, is in this really kind of chaotic, crazy state. And so, yeah, it feels like this like constant like bouncing of that. And I think that for me what that means is that it's the sharpening of my own soul and psyche so that I can best show up for those things and best participate in the collective, and like I take care of myself and then I can work good, essentially is what I'm saying and stuff. But yeah, dude,
you seem pretty healthy, man. Like you work out and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you're pretty fucking ripped, bro.
Thanks, dude. Honestly, I think what that stemmed from was my mother. She had five of us kids, and my stepfather was like, he was in the military, and so he was like deployed and shit a lot. And I saw my mother go from this woman who was extremely stressed out, and in this chaotic state, and she was like 300 something pounds at one point, very overweight. And then she just like through her fucking will, dude, and like truly hitting rock bottom. Was like, I'm gonna change this, and like started to live a healthy lifestyle and lost an immense amount of weight and has kept it off ever since. And I watched this crazy transformation of like her turn into a healthy person. And this was like right around like when I was starting to like become a young man. Like it was like between like the ages of like kind of like 10 to like 14, 15ish. I saw my mom like become healthy, and truly it was like I acquired a different mother. I, Obviously still my mom. I always loved my mom, but she just this different person, man. And so that I think really instilled in me this feeling of like I need to be healthy. And then also like I've tapped into that a lot within like the mystical experience as well too. Like when I work out, it's truly by no means like I want to, coming from a place of like I want to look good. Like that's a nice like icing on the cake if I do end up looking good at some point in some sort of way or whatever. But it's like it's this way in which I can love myself truly, because it's kind of like meditation. It's like if I meditate on my couch, it's like I could choose to smoke weed or watch TV or like have sex with my girlfriend, but I'm choosing to sit. I think there's something really important in that, and like having that discipline. And it's such a way of like loving and nurturing yourself, I feel like. And working out is very similar to that for me. But yeah, dude, I appreciate you saying that, man.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
jacked. That's
totally.
thanks.
Hey, that's a DMT ninja. That's the DMT ninja. I wrote something down in my notes. I was like, I wanted to ask you, like, I wanted you to further extrapolate like what the DMT ninja means. I know it's kind of
Yeah,
like a meme and a joke, but if you're DMT ninja, I'm a LSD samurai.
dude, I fucking love that. That's great. So I don't know if you remember, it was our first like Tubers podcast that we did all together.
Yeah, of course.
And I was on I forget what the fuck I was talking about. I was on some sort of rant, and I was like, I think I kind of remember the context. I was like, we got to become fucking ninjas. I was like, we got to become a DMT
Yeah,
ninja for this shit. And like,
yeah.
I remember I was going back through like on one of like those fucking like Opus clip, like making clips out of this podcast, and I saw that part, and I was like, that is really fun. Like, I really think that's funny that I said that. You have become a
So
DMT ninja.
that's where it started.
Yeah, that was where it started. And like,
Wow.
if you think about, I just like kind of said it in this rant, like, and I was like, if you think about it though, like a ninja, I was like, ninjas, like, a ninja spends his entire life preparing for that potential moment that it might fuck somebody up. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's just like true, like everyday discipline and like way of life in correlation with that like sacred, very sacred thing, which their
Yeah.
sacred thing is like this sacred aggression. And I might be misrepresenting that. I hope I'm not. But like, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like with DMT, it's like I was saying with the matrix of it all, I think it necessitates that really extreme nexus point, necessitates this sort of like matrix around it, in which like I do think with like a lot of these other, like with all these other experiences, it requires like a certain degree of like discipline and forethought and training. And I think that exists at like so many different levels. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that like a lot of times what bubbles to the surface for me in these like a DMT experience, it's like the entirety of me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there's not any single aspect that I could run. And of course, there's like some experiences that are super visionary. The alien showed me this and shit. But there's also that like felt sense of like my entire being and the accumulation of my entire life that led up into this nexus point moment. You know, and so I was thinking about that, like whenever I was watching this clip back, and I was like, yeah, you do kind of have to become like a little bit like I think we should become ninjas. And I was like, DMT ninja, like it was funny to me. And so then I made this other like little reel, like kind of similar to micropreneurs content, where I was like, I'm the DMT ninja, like I don't know, I'm just making fun of making fun of myself, and making fun of like the entire thing stuff too. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no, that's awesome. You know who I think really is a DMT ninja?
Rob,
RIP is he definitely is, yeah. But who I was thinking of was that guy Clindy Lee.
Clindy Lee,
Clindy
is
Lee. Yeah. He just passed away a few years ago. He's a black dude and he's like super into martial arts, and he would describe these mega doses of like 30 grams, 40 grams, and like he would describe these fucking like battles in the hyperspace, and he would like take his actual training and like have these whole entire like battle royale in hyperspace.
Dude, I have to look up his shit. That is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Oh my
so
God,
he's the OG. I think there is something like maybe not sacred aggression, but like the sacred like spirit of a warrior.
Yeah.
Maybe not the
Yeah.
aggression itself, but yeah, that warrior spirit I think
Yeah.
has a lot of value.
And I guess like that's what I was alluding to with like the word aggression, like sacred aggression, like putting sacred like before the word aggression, because it's like, you know, the aggression is there, but the aggression is there for like a truly sacred reason. You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
Like, you know, it's I feel like a ninja would enact this lifelong this life he lived, this entire lifestyle and training, everything. He would enact that only in a moment where it was like truly sacred and necessary, where like something was threatening himself, like his life or the life of people he loved. And you see that with like MMA fighters. They're usually not like very problematic, and a lot of times I hear they're very confident, sweet people, and it kind of stems from this place of like they feel safe and they know like, okay, if I really do have to then go there, like I've been training for this shit. Kind of like with DMT too. It's like, oh, if it's time to go there, it's like, yeah, I can do the fucking, and I do this shit. I have my own funny little ritualistic way of doing it. But you know, like I can do all the candles. I can meditate beforehand. I can do all that shit, bro. But like I'm telling you, that's a fucking small sliver of it. I think it's who the fuck are you as a person? Like, you know, truly. I think it's you bring everything to the table with that. You know. Yeah.
No, that's valid. And that was one of the things that in my video about the voice of the mushroom is because, you know, we were talking about the eagle and the condor thing, and I'm into Carl Jung, who also talks about like the anima, which is basically like the unconscious feminine aspects within a man, and how you are more of a whole person if you integrate that side of yourself, because we're taught to be like, oh, is that girly in some way? Don't do that. Like, boys don't cry, that kind of like stuff that I think we're growing out of, but a lot of us were raised in a certain way. So anyway, I felt like the first like 10 years of psychedelic exploration were like learning to appreciate the feminine, you know, as far as like the of Mother Earth and the abundance and receptiveness and compassion and empathy and all of these things that are not like hard man stuff. Yeah. And once I had gotten a taste of that, I saw a YouTube video of this guy Nathaniel Drew, who he doesn't make psychedelic content normally, but he did make like a trip report video. And his intention going into the trip was to investigate his masculinity or his manhood, because he was like insecure, because he felt like you got to be tall, you got to be blah, 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 to be manly, when it's way, way more of an internal thing. So that was one of the things that he explored in his trip. And he said he felt this energy like radiating, and he felt secure in that. And so I was like, that's an interesting idea. Like, I've never thought of like exploring masculinity through mushrooms. So let me try that. And when I did, I got a voice in my head that said, protect what you love. It's a good job to have.
Oh, dude, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's like the ninja thing, you know, like the sacred warrior thing. It's like,
yeah,
that is the correct use of that aggressive energy, is in protection of what you love. Including yourself, hopefully. Dude. Hopefully you love yourself, protect yourself.
That was so beautiful, dude. Yes, 100%,
yeah, well,
man.
Hey, it wasn't me, it was a mushroom.
Yeah. Yeah, and what you said there about like the kind of collectively, it's like we're bringing that feminine side to the surface more and integrating that more. You know, one thing I thought about, I was having a conversation with this guy named Ryan Sprague. He's on the podcast recently, and he's this whole cannabis ninja guy about using cannabis, you know, consciously and thoughtfully, rebuilding your relationship to cannabis. And one thing that he was describing about his relationship to cannabis, which I really resonated with, and I was like, that's a good way of articulating it, as he was like, you know, he's like, he has like multiple businesses, and he's very much a go-getter, entrepreneurial type. And he's like, when I'm in that, he's like, I operate in that a lot. He's like, in this time of my life, he's like, and it's a very like masculine state for me. He's like, and when I introduce cannabis or something like that, he's like, I can very easily use it as a tool to kind of like shift into this more feminine.
Mm.
state with it. And I've described this in a myriad of different ways about cannabis, but also about psychedelics, I think. Like there's this, and it's not that I need psychedelics or cannabis to reach and feel into the feminine side of myself. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say I think they are powerful catalysts for putting me into that kind of energy and then working with it from there. And I've described in some ways like, just like when I take mushrooms, man, to like an outside or something, like I get this like cathartic chance to kind of like, deal with some emotions and like, things like that. And like, I realize like, and that's true. It does feel like this in a lot of ways. And it's because there is like this dipping into this very feminine side of myself, wherein a lot of times I am operating from this, like, I gotta wake up. I gotta get my son ready for school. I gotta, kind of like stretch and warm my body up before I gotta get to work on my computer for the next 10 hours and then get a workout in there in between that, and then have a podcast after that. Maybe mom can pick up Hudson from school so I can do that podcast. And then it's like, so when I finally do get that time, maybe on a weekend or in the afternoon or something, it's like I kind of like being able to quickly shift into that feminine state. And I think that, and of course, there's always a balance with that type of thing. You have to ask yourself, truly, why are you doing this? What is the true intentions? But I think when you frame it like that, I think that for myself, I won't say that for others. I think for myself, framing it like that has been healthy for sure.
Yeah, one way I think of it is that like the whole masculine feminine thing are just like labels of stereotypes that normally we fit into, when in actuality all of these qualities are human qualities, but we just give it this name and then we kind of box ourselves in beforehand, and the names are really just like for convenience and communication's sake, in that all of these qualities are ultimately human qualities that we're like starving ourselves of. And I just wanted to add one thing, is that after my mushroom trip where it said protect what you love, I was like, okay, let me flip the coin again and like really try to understand this feminine side. And one of the things that happened was that I was listening to music and I started breaking into this flow. And I'm a kind of person that like doesn't really dance. I'm always like either too shy or like the music doesn't make me feel anything. So I'm just like, I'm not trying to be like too cool, but it's just like I've always had like a blockage there. So I was listening to music on mushrooms and I was like breaking into this flow, and then it just all of a sudden felt like this cathartic release and surrender. And that's the lesson, the takeaway I got from the feminine was that surrendering is actually empowering. It's like giving yourself up to something is actually empowering yourself, which is like kind of a paradox, right? Like you would think that surrendering and yielding to something is like being weak, but it's actually a very powerful thing to do.
With that being said, can I go grab a painting real quick?
Yeah.
So this is one of the first sort of like beings that I met on DMT, and he was like this square orange guy, and he had this almost like jail suit on. This is really interesting because I ended up going to jail later, for DMT, right? And his arms did this thing. I was like flying through hyperspace, and I came to this like screeching halt in front of him. And he had this, orange blocky head, and he had his jail suit on. He's like kind of floating there, and his arms like folded down as if like a roll of receipts going downstairs, almost like the forming to the shape of like stairs. He was like, and he said, and it was really funny because like what I was like grappling with on the rocket ride up there was, and I went there with this very poignant question. And it was because I had just started like messing around with DMT, and I knew there was something in here, and I knew it was like life changing, and like I was going to be very passionate exploring this, but I was like, I'll be honest with you, I was struggling a bit, like with the anxiety and all the come up stuff, and even actually properly vaporizing it correctly, because there's a whole weird sort of like art form involved within that. But then I got this cart, these little carts, and I got a really good pen base for it. And this one was fucking hitting this day, and I fucking got a little blast off here. And I asked, like, I went with this poignant question of like, why is this so hard for me? Like, why am I struggling with this? Like, why I thought, like, I know this is so beautiful. I'm like, what? But why am I scared of this when I know, like, that you love me, that this is all going to be okay? Why am I struggling with this? And that was what I got. This fucking dude who said, surrender. And he said it just like, he was like, surrender. you know, like, and I, you know, of course
Wow.
it's never like these like voice like vibration. It is really kind of like this down low, but that's what the down low was like. It was like surrender. Yeah.
Wow, dude, that is
Yeah, dude.
powerful. I got the goosebumps when you told me that it was before you went to jail too, that he had a jail suit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
bro, there's this
Well,
guy. Well, go ahead, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. No, please go. I'm sorry to cut you off.
So there's this guy who makes YouTube videos called Jesse Michaels, and
Okay.
he just had this video where they're talking about precognition in dreams or in art,
Mm-hmm.
where basically you kind of predict your own future, and there may be some kind of like quantum thing in our brains that like Terrence McKenna used to talk about, like that there's a future and the future is a strange attractor pulling us towards it rather than like history pushing forward. And what I
Ooh.
think that I was just listening to stuff about this, and I feel like you're painting your vision, that's got to be some kind of precognition that it was like right before you went to jail. Also, you have to surrender to get arrested, am I right?
Yeah.
So like, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, and I did surrender. I had to turn myself in that day. Like
Yeah.
it was this whole thing. But another aspect of this too is, and I'm sorry, like there's always that 1 second lag, so I'm never trying to like interrupt you. It's just like we both go to talk.
Yeah, it's
But
fine.
so 2 weeks before, it was like I say 2 weeks. It was like roughly some like a couple weeks before my spot got raided and my life like blew up in my face and the launch pad, you know, got compromised and all the shit. It was like a couple weeks before, dude. I had this DMT experience where I was like, it was the world that I was in was like this very kind of like the material it was made up of was like this pattern and it was repeating itself, and that's what the entire world was made of. And it was like this like white like gridding thing, like these like certain nodes of like kind of red and maybe some yellowish in there, and like it was very divine, like waiting room esque type thing. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I saw my son Hudson in this waiting room, and he was crying. Like I could tell he was like scared and like crying. And I remember like desperately, and I was saying it out loud. Like, you know, like sometimes you smoke DMT, like even within like the experience, like you might be saying love in the experience, but your body is also like saying love. And you can kind of tell, like, you know, you're physically saying this. But I was like desperately like trying to be like, it's okay, dude. Like daddy's here. You know, like daddy, like dude, like it's okay, buddy. Like, and I could tell like he didn't know I was there. Like couldn't hear me. And he was fucking crying. And these two beings walked up and like just walked up. And I remember one put its hand on Hudson's shoulder and they like took him by the hand and they like started walking off like into the distance of this like fucking like field that we were in. And then they like just basically like blipped out. And that was like when I came back to, and I was crying. I was like, what the fuck? And dude, like I can't tell you how much like I thought about that experience while I was incarcerated. And there's always that question that we have, I think, as psychonauts of like, how much is a message and how much is a projection, right? And dude, I thought about that heavily with that DMT trip in particular. A lot of them I did. Surrender one too, even. But dude, that one in particular was deep for me and
That
very like the guilt that I felt too, man, of like, it was like they were trying to tell me. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
dude, that is moving. That is moving. Well, just based on what I can see, I can tell you're a good dad, and like, yeah, you wouldn't let something like that happen again. You know,
Yeah, yeah, dude.
it's also not your fault that this stuff is illegal too. It shouldn't be. You
Yeah,
gonna say
dude.
something?
It was a game that I was playing, and I was aware like there was consequences, and
Yeah,
I got caught, you know. And so like when it really did all happen, I had this felt sense of like that happened. This is gonna be difficult, but like shit's gonna be okay. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah,
I'm not going away for fucking 30 years or some shit. You know, like I
right.
knew it was like based on what I had, who the fuck I was. Like I wasn't actually a bad person with like guns and any sort of violent history or anything. I was like, I'm gonna do a little bit of time, but they're not gonna try and fucking lock me away, throw the key
Yeah,
away. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna try and smack me on the wrist, and
for
like that's what
sure.
they did. And I just try to approach it as like, you know, this is my launch pad. This is my catalyst for growth. And
Yeah,
it truly has been that in a lot of ways for me, man. And I look back on it with so much gratitude. Wouldn't change a fucking thing, you know. And
yeah,
to a certain degree too, like I described to you earlier, like I knew I was playing with fire with all this shit, and like I by
yeah,
no means think I'm like a shaman or even a facilitator.
yeah.
Like maybe I can facilitate for some people and stuff, but like, dude, like I truly I truly went about it with the best intentions, and I stuck to my fucking guns. And to this
Yeah.
day, I still like stuck by it in terms of like, nope, this is what I care about. I'm gonna find a way, you know.
Right.
And like, I take a lot of pride in that, you
Yeah.
know.
No,
Yeah, man.
that is legit. Yeah, it's gonna be so righteous, in the future when you have your next Launchpad 2.0, and then you're helping facilitate. This may come as a surprise to you, but I still haven't tried DMT, man.
Really?
Yeah, and I was talking to Rob about it because he's Uncle Rob, and he's the DMT ninja.
He's the
Um,
OG one.
and yeah, and then he was like, yeah, next time, like, go do DMT, and then we'll have another podcast basically to talk about it. But I asked him for some advice, and I wanted to ask you for advice because, like, here's the thing: I've been kind of ready to do it, but I always hear people talk about like, oh, when you're ready for it, it'll fall in your lap, that kind of thing. And so I was like, all right, I guess I'll just wait for it to magically appear in front of me. But that hasn't happened. And now
Nah.
I'm 31. I'm like, when is this gonna happen? So now I'm like, I feel ready in another way where I'm like, I'm done waiting. Like, I want to
Yep.
seek it out and find it. So I guess, like, with that in
Yeah.
mind, when I do it, what would you recommend? Like, any thoughts for first timers?
Yeah, dude. So just to touch base on like what we just said there and described about that, it's an interesting phenomenon in the DMT community. Vaporized DMT community is like that is something that's pushed forth, and I've heard it pushed forth quite a bit of like you gotta let the DMT find you. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll even tell you, dude, like that's how it happened to me, and it's really weird, like kind of like it like chills type of way when I think about it and when it happened. But with that said, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I don't think that that's a universal thing, and I think that that's silly to subscribe to that. Like as a blanket.
Yeah.
My best friend himself, first time he tried it, like, he extracted it himself and went about like really
Hell
took
yeah.
the agency and like
Yeah.
he wouldn't have had it any other way. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I really think, yeah, if you're at that point of like, I've waited, I gave the universe that I made my intentions clear. It's like, yeah, dude, obviously go with either like somebody you really love and trust
Yeah.
and really know that source intimately, or do it yourself. That's
For
what I
sure.
would say for that. And I'm sure you've come to that conclusion already.
Yeah. That's good advice.
Thanks, man. Thanks. But like I would say for the experience itself, there's always gonna be some element of resistance that you have to push past, even like after you've done it. Like no matter how many times you've done it, there's this like element to it of like you at a certain point we do just have to be fucking brave. No matter how much of the ninjaing we've done, no matter how optimal the set and setting are,
Yeah.
there's an element you do just have to kind of either be brave, and that's I think that's part of like that punching that ticket that's really unique, because some of these other things, you're really waiting for the onset, and yeah, you are punching a ticket too, but it's like with DMT, it's like this is fucking coming right away. But yeah, so I think it's about really accepting that. And okay, so like I've described this a lot when talking about DMT, but this is by far sort of my favorite way to do it, and it's usually on like around like if we're talking like golden teachers again or something like that, like 2 grams or something like that. Beyond like 2 grams and really having this very sweet experience. Usually during that experience, I spend a lot of time with it just like laying down, just fucking getting into a good place. And there's like this already mini heroic journey that I feel like is built into a lot of like the serotonergic psychedelic experiences like psilocybin and LSD, where it's like there's this bit of resistance at first that takes a certain art of surrendering and things, and then there's like this peace and equanimity that you reach on the other side of. I think having that mini microcosm of the blast off in the hero's journey beforehand and getting one foot in that other world first, dude, for me, just subjectively, has always helped with that transition so much by already being tripping. You
That
know what I'm
makes
saying?
total sense. That makes total
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like when it comes to so is there a particular way that you're thinking of consuming it? Is it gonna are you gonna like sandwich it? Do you have a cart? Are you gonna do you have anything in mind?
No, I mean, it sounds like the vape, like the machine vapes, are a good way to be like real accurate with it. And
Mhm.
the one friend that used to have it, and then I hit him up. He's like, "Oh, I don't have it anymore." That was how he was gonna do it, and we were gonna do 0.35 milligram first, and then another one at point 50 or like, yeah, start at 0.35 and then do a second one where it's more of like the breakthrough range.
50. Okay,
Yeah,
I got you.
something like that.
And this is another element of it that's subjective. But now I actually talked to this other guy about this on one of my podcasts. But there's this thing, this phenomenon that I think is under talked about actually within the DMT community, and it's called the underdose, right? And now there's a whole culture of people who do like taking quote unquote like microdoses and non-breakthrough size doses of DMT and find that very unique and therapeutic in its own right and use it as its own tool, and that's great. But I've also experienced this phenomenon, and I've experienced that. But I've also experienced this phenomenon of the underdose, and that's like these times where it's like, maybe I was kind of on the fence about going, maybe I wanted to go back later, but this one trip I had where I got really close and just had to sit in the tension and didn't break through was just so like, there's a phenomenon where it's like you have these experiences, the underdoses, and there's sometimes a feeling of like, ooh, I would have been better off by having done the full breakthrough size dose right off the rip. And I'm not saying that's what I think you need to do. If your gut is telling you to titrate up, I've done that before and been super successful with it as well. But over time, I've leaned more into this, like when it's time, I'm either like purposely taking a very small microdose for like some really niche thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or it's like, it's time to go. And like, I'm loading up a random amount. Fuck it, we're going to see what God gives me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the kind of way that I've leaned into it now more a day and stuff. But like, you know, there is an element too, man, with the dosage of it. I say I just put a random amount in. That's irresponsible. I really don't. I've weighed out my particular batch enough where I can sort of eyeball in a way. Not perfectly, I know, but like, roughly eyeball. But there is a threshold that you can hit if you take an absorbent amount where you can like kind of black out-ish, and I have done that as well too. Yeah, man, I think like the ultimate fear of it, and it's a real fear, is that it's this insanely powerful nexus point where it can go it can be the best experience of your life and it can be the worst experience of your life. And I've had both, you know what I'm saying? I've truly had both. You know, and it's like, how do we optimize to get more good ones, you know? And I play that game myself, but it's like in the entirety of it all, it's like, oh, no, I think the bad ones are just as important. Like I do for you know, and I've had like a few, I say a few. There's really one that was like wickedly bad. But I think about that one a lot, and it's really had an interesting little impact in its own way and stuff on me. And so I think it's also this element of like, okay, like I've done all ninja shit. I've burned the sage in here, ready for blast stuff. I'm okay if it's bad at this point. It's kind of this like staring in the eyes and saying, and, you know what I'm saying? Like as bad as it can get, and like, you know, like, and that's easier said than done, obviously, sometimes when you're in a state where it's like, who the fuck even am I? I've had that, like, within some of these really dark experiences where it's true, like, how did I end up in this realm? Who am I? What the fuck is going on? This is actually very terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it's the acceptance of that and that nexus point with the gravitation towards the light. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's the recognition of the evil, but the gravitation towards the light, I think. You know, it's the nurturing and the healing of the evil. Yeah, man. Those are some tips that I can give you. There's probably a lot that I'm missing, but
that's solid. No, and I'm not gonna do it today. So if you think of anything, please let me know. But I think what you said is all genuinely like solid advice, and I'll take that to heart. And I appreciate the information about, you know, what to expect, because I am an experienced psychonaut, so I know the range of possibilities, but DMT is its own beast, and I already fear and respect it in a way, or not like fear, but like respect the power of it, like a powerful tool that it is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'll let you know, man. I got your word and Uncle Rob's.
I'll say this too. I'm really excited to talk to you about it. Like, please, you don't have to. Please don't feel like inclined. But like, if you want to share with me once you've had this experience, I'm really excited to see how it develops for you. And part of that's because like, I love you. I think talking to you is super interesting, and like to see that come out of that stream of consciousness will be cool. But also something that I've experienced, and I've talked to other people. I think other people have experienced this. I think you can experience this like high dose mushrooms, but it seems to have its own unique edge with DMT. There can sometimes be this tricky, I think, reintegration process with something like that, you know, where it's like, and I've said it before in this simplified way, but it's really true of like, it's been hard for me before to smoke DMT and go see God one night, and then the next morning have to go deliver pizzas, you know, and do college class homework. It's like nothing about this is reaffirming the mystical insights and like values that I received last night. In fact, I feel like almost it's like slipping away from my fingers, and how do I become the ninja to like integrate this within the sort of current cultural matrix that I'm existing in. And so I don't know what the exact answer is to that, man. And like I feel like it would be somewhat disingenuous for me to like say like that for you, but I will say in like my own personal journey, what I've really tapped into, and I think like is like I see a lot of other people kind of tapping into, creating some sort of art around it, like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. And like I think you're going to do that. I'm really excited to see that art that stems from it.
That's the plan. I mean, my relationship to psychedelics has always been tied to my art, my music. You know, I'm a musician, and the first time I had my life-changing LSD experience that I always talk about, I got to jam, and like that cemented for me in the fact that like this euphoric love that I feel in my heart, I need to express it through music. And ever since then, psychedelics have continued to inspire me. LSD has been my, like, for whatever reason, I feel like it sticks longer to where I'm jamming, like the day after an LSD trip, I'm jamming, I'm like, this is trippy as fuck. But I love that. I love that. So I'm absolutely going to be like channeling that through my art and music whenever I do DMT.
Yeah, dude. In the LSD thing, man, I feel this simultaneous special connection to LSD, and I think it's because it's infused with that fucking American anti-cultural spirit.
Yeah.
I think because that's what it came up in, dude. Like, obviously it was all around the world, but like, dude, that was the hotbed for it, and that was like really what a lot of people associate it with, and it's for a reason. It has that spirit entwined in it.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a friend about this recently, but you know, it's something I've alluded to on previous podcasts that we've done, is like, I really don't care what somebody else's opinions are and what their specific sort of opinion and dogmatic way of like, you have to ritualize it in this way. I think that is the issue. I think we need to reject that with this sort of psychedelic renaissance and really retain our personal sovereignty through all this. The fuck your carrot on the stick, like we're gonna do it anyways, like Micropreneur is talking about, you know. And I really heavily tapped into this feeling one time during a music festival when I took 10 hits of LSD.
Damn.
It was a whole story. I'm making a YouTube video about it, dude.
Nice.
Like this, I'm doing a whole big painting over here, like trying to describe this vision that I had during the experience, man. But I had this fucking really feeling into this feeling of like LSD, and like I was like, you know, LSD sometimes, even the psychedelic community has sometimes this connotation of like, it's a little bit more squirrely and like it's, you know, it's a little more recreational maybe, or it's different, not as like spiritual as mushrooms or. But dude, I was like, to me, with that American like anti-cultural spirit infused in it, 10 hits, had a fucking music festival, you know, dude. Like I was feeling into this thing of like, you know, we've posed that question in one of the PsychTubers podcasts, like, what does the psychedelic renaissance look for us? And we came to this conclusion of like, well, like biker gangs and like, you know, this already, like, dude, I had this deep vision on the 10 hits of like, oh, it's already here. What music festivals are, right? I was like, when music, at least American music festival, I've been to quite a few of these fucking things now. I was like, what these things are is this crazy, intelligent, unspoken hive mind network that we've created where it's safe spaces for people to take hallucinogens. Because it's something that is, kind of like I described earlier in the podcast, is built within us and it's going to bubble up to the surface at some point. You know, when you go to these things, there's so many smoke and mirrors. The fucking music, the colors, the dancing, like all of it. And it's all part of the matrix, and it's so important. It adds to it. But dude, when you really look at people and you start to interact with people, you start to ask people what they're on. Dude, people are going there to take fucking hallucinogenic drugs in a safe place and have like transformative and have experiences. That's really what like is a big driving factor of this entire industry even being a thing. Because yes, like people at the top controlling it might have, you know, whatever intentions and things, but like ultimately it's driven by the consumers and like us as a collective, and we decided like this is something we like spending our money on and doing. That's why it's become a humongous industry. And I was feeling into that with the LSD, and I was like, man, there's something about that 10 hits that day, and like some of the insights and fucking visions and things that I had, and just the feelings that I had, where it was like I almost felt like I received like this like American rite of passage, shamanic rite of passage, like American like psychedelic baptism. You know what I'm saying? I remember this guy at one point. His name's Doss. He's this like 50-year-old guy who's like this everyone's favorite psychedelic uncle. Who I live in Western Kentucky, and it seems like any fucking music festival I go to that's even within like 6 hours of here, he's at it, like working it, fucking knows everybody. Like he's just the psychedelic uncle. And he came up to me during this like 10 hits. I was sitting underneath this Bodhi tree on the come up, having one of the most blissful experiences of my life. And he came up and sat next to me, handed me a joint. And he said, "You all right, son?" And it was him saying son. And I was like, it was this deep sense of like the passage of like, you know, if you think like the shamanic cultures, they take the children and they teach them their ways and they usher them along and they're proud to see them develop. And I felt like there was like this, my psychedelic, we say about Rob, like it was my psychedelic uncle who's like, he would almost in a way, and I can see he had made sacrifices and he had himself suffered and played the whole ninja game, almost in a way of like further paving the path for others. And I'm one of the people who got to receive and benefit from that. And I also remember when he handed me this joint, like having all these feelings and insights. And I looked over at him, man. And I've seen this guy like 6 times at this point. You know what I'm saying? I've like at 6 different festivals, like a fucking lovely human being. And I just looked over at him. Mind you, he's like 50 years old, something like that, probably 50, 40. And I saw him as a baby, dude. Like really saw him as a baby. Like it's gonna make me sound like a crazy person, but like visually and like, you know, like felt it. Like, dude, I saw him as a baby, and it was this crazy deep empathy for who he was as a person, the journey he had been on. And like, yeah, man, what was interesting is like this vision I was having of him as a baby, like in real time, like in my like eyed open. Like it's another weird thing that's kind of hard for me to describe, but we can unpack that too. But like I saw him like also kind of like forming into this like little, like evolving as like this little boy. And it gave me this feeling of like, I don't know if you remember this. I think this is a very sweet part about being a little boy. And I'm sure little girls experience this as well too. But like as a little boy, when you're like 11 years old and like you meet a friend, you become friends with somebody, it's kind of like being an adult and meeting a friend and y'all are tripping together. Like that level of bonding and camaraderie and unconditional love that you have for this human being as like a little, like when y'all are little boys together. Like some of the friends I had as little boys, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I really try to embody that, and I think I do with the friends that I have as adults, you know what I'm saying? But like there was something as a kid where it was effortless, you know what I'm saying? We just,
I think because you live in your imagination. Like think of the things you love to do when you're with these friends as kids. Like you build forts, you create games, you create these whole scenarios in your mind where it's like you're like, you know, you make your life a video game. And I think it might be like partially to do with like embodying the imagination. And also like maybe another thing too about when we're kids is that when you remove all of this extra layer of like society and paying the bills and stuff, it's like that's what's there is this raw like love and connection to each other.
Yeah, and it's funny because like one of the things that it's sad to see, one of the sort of I think biggest blockers, I think it is like the biggest blocker now within the current state of things, like people's like basic needs and that root chakra. When you meet somebody who's like truly like in poverty, and like some of the like you live in rural Kentucky and you even see like generational poverty and things like that, and it's like you described, it's like I know like, you know, there's this very lovable child like within all of us, within you, but it's like, you know, when those basic needs aren't being met, it's hard for that to come out.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And there's all this, and that's another big aspect of the psychedelic renaissance I think is important and under talked about. There's so much emphasis on, well, you just got to have this, you need to go do ayahuasca in the jungle, and you need to manifest, and you need to take my breathwork course, and you need to take ice baths in the morning and things like that. I think that's like all so true, right? But it sometimes to me also feels like a carrot on stick phenomenon, at least within my reality tunnel of, yeah, I'll be honest, like I've separated myself from that, at least to a certain degree, where I feel like comfortable, you know what I'm saying, financially, but like where I live at, and like a lot of people I need to know and even love, it's like I said, there's like that generational poverty that exists, and a lot of it does stem from these like sort of like weird systematic issues and different like methods of oppression, and like that's a whole rabbit hole that we can go down if we want. But like, yeah, and so when I see things like psychedelics and kind of like the whole microdosing phenomenon that's going to fix your depression thing, it's kind of like, you know, like, yeah, for some people, like putting it into this box will kind of like help them, you know what I'm saying, like temporarily. But like, god damn it, if this fucking dude like can't, you know, like lose some weight and develop healthy relationships and maybe fix his erectile dysfunction and like, you know, like truly like mind, body, spirit, like, you know, like, yeah, dude. And so I'm sorry, I forget where I was going with all this. I guess I was just kind of ranting at this point.
Yeah, I feel
But
you. No, that's
yeah,
that's an important part of all of this.
it's the carrot on the stick phenomenon, and I think people need to be like careful with that aspect of all of this and psychedelics and things like that. And
Yeah.
it's something I had to learn the hard way of, like when I was describing the mountaintop and coming back. I was like, I'd come
Mm.
back to this life that I didn't like living. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
That was a really big lesson for me to learn. Was like, you know, it's hard for me to come back from these mountaintops because I have formulated a matrix for myself that I don't like to exist in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was difficult to change that matrix.
Yeah, right. It makes me think that like even though DMT trip is so short, I should probably take like 2 days off to where I can just straight up like meditate on what just happened, you know, and like give myself that space.
Other thing, I'm glad you said that. I did forget to, and I would highly recommend that, giving yourself space before and afterward.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I think there's any like certain right amount of time for that. Like you need
Yeah.
2 days off work before, and then like you need,
Yeah.
you know, like, dude, it could be a few hours. Like, but like you do need whatever time that is for yourself to kind of like, you know, yeah, to get in that headspace for that. Yeah, dude, like I said, immediately afterwards, there is this interesting dance. And a lot of times it is this like crazy euphoric afterglow. And sometimes you'll have a beautiful experience and the afterglow can, quote unquote, afterglow can be kind of depressing because of like a lot of different reasons and things that I've like elaborated on. And that it's in itself is its own teacher and journey, I think. But yeah, dude.
Yeah. Well, I'll be sure to report to you and I'm sure we'll talk more about this. So, I got one more question for you and then I think we can head out. So, the thing I wanted to ask you about was, you know, we talked about the future of your path in general, like starting the DMT church and continuing to do all the stuff that you're kind of starting now. But I wanted to ask you something more specific, like what is your vision for the future of your channel? Because I also think you're really good at this stuff, and like I want to know like what you envision for the future of the channel, because I know you do a mix of like short form and YouTube. So yeah, what do you have in mind, bro?
Thanks, dude. I thank you for asking because I've actually like thought about this a lot recently and stuff. And I feel like here lately, like I've gotten this sort of revitalization of the love of like creating and stuff again, and
Mm,
like just being an artist, like trying to like create art things that I like. Do you know what I'm saying?
mm,
And so like I guess at the core of it all, like that's kind of what the plan is, to make it a place where I create shit that I like. And I think that if I do that, it'll resonate with who it's supposed to resonate with. And like I've already seen that in a very microcosm type of way. Just the fact that I'm like talking to you right now is an example of that. You know what I mean? But I think that I'm gonna continue. I know it's super saturated, a lot of some fucking white dudes with podcast equipment out there, but I'm one of them, and I think I'm gonna continue to do those. I love it, dude. I love having. I legitimately like. Even if we didn't put this out on YouTube, bro, like this was like such a positive use of my time. Like it's.
yeah,
I love this shit. So yeah, more podcasts. I'll probably fucking do that till I'm 80. I can seriously just see
yeah,
myself just like doing that as a hobby, like because I love
yeah.
talking to you guys. I think on top of that, I have this one that I'm working on, a trip report video. I'm
Mm,
gonna get back into trip reports because like I've
nice.
realized that it's like there's some of my past trip reports, I'll be honest with you, I'm truly not proud of in terms of like the quality and like the head state that I was in, like, and oh my God, bro. But they're still up there, and I keep them up there for a reason. But like I think the involvement of that is gonna be really interesting to see, like myself. And also, there's such creating a trip report. I think is such a healthy way for me personally to like show this thing, whatever it is, the divine God, to send it a little node, some love, but then also
Yeah,
like, love myself simultaneously and like unpack this experience in my
yeah,
own unique therapeutic way, and real time integrate it into my life, and potentially in the process of all of that, maybe I'll build an audience and build a career for myself and
yeah.
for my kid, you know. Um, Yeah, dude. And so that's really the intention with the channel. Do the podcast. I want to do some more trip reports. There's a couple of other like things I'm like contemplating, and but it all comes down to like truly like there's a balance with it. You can lose yourself and you can stretch yourself out with it. And honestly, I don't want my channel to ever become that. It's become that for me before at times where I felt like this need to like succeed and get views and grow my channel and like post consistently and shit. And like over time, dude, I've just realized I'm like, I want it to be art, like this art, and like that's it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, and I think that if I do it any other way, I'm not going to be as successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a battle that a lot of people deal with. It's almost a blessing to be unknown because there's no sense of a pressure of like, oh, this is the thing that got me my audience, so I better keep that up, because I feel that trap people get caught into whenever it's like, oh, they found their golden goose or whatever, and now they feel a pressure to make only that kind of content.
I love that you said this because I've thought about this. I've beckoned this myself. And it's funny because you think about it, we do this as human beings removed from the internet world. Like even within our like localized social circles, real life, like human beings fall into the same trap as well too of creating a certain character mass that usually evolves because like it's like that external validation, similar to like the social media thing where it's got a bunch of likes for, you know what I'm saying? And so it reinforces this like kind of certain like character of yourself and then these things, and like a lot of times people don't even see it, like they don't see it coming because it's just like, well, yeah, this is who I am, like, you know what I mean? I'm the upbeat one, like that's who I am. And it's like, no, as a little girl that was the thing that got you validation from your daddy, and not, it's a very simplified down, but like,
I know what you're
yeah,
talking
man,
about.
I think that absolutely, and I also think that this whole like creator economy and digital world is very interesting. And let's be fucking real, it's insanely saturated. It's not like starting a podcast in 2015. It's not like, trying to whatever. And there's a lot of people I think out there like, trying to play that game. And there's a whole industry around like making money off people who are trying to play that game. It's this whole funny dichotomy, but like I think what's going to stand out going forward in the future is like the art, like the true art, the shit that resonates. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like and it has to come from that place, like because it's going to be such a saturated AI filled fucking world and digital world. Like it's going to be the ones who truly is like, oh, like there's oh, like that made me feel, Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's totally true. And yeah, with the more like mass produced shit that we're gonna get, people are gonna get so hungry for like something real. And that's one of the main reasons that I started this channel, was to improve my storytelling. Because my dad is like a really good storyteller, and he has a way of like telling a story that's hilarious, and like everyone is on the edge of their seat. And I'm like, that's such a crazy skill that like I don't think it's something I just naturally have, but I'm trying to develop it.
Yeah.
I think it's stuff like that, like storytelling. Like we are narrative creatures. So if you can get better at telling stories, then that is like a valuable thing that you can give to other people. And that's one of my goals for the channel, is to use storytelling to inspire awe and wonder in people, because I think that's just like, it's like a nutrient. We have to have it. And I feel like I get that sense from you too, that there's a sense of like awe and wonder and appreciation for like the wonders of the universe and the psychedelic stuff. And that's what it's all about, man, to me at least.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. It was Ari Shapir. I remember he was on Joe Rogan podcast. He was talking about this ayahuasca experience that he had where he visually saw like he was like sending these nodes into the sky and like certain things and actions that he would do. It's like these certain nodes. And yeah, man, I've had like visionary experiences, not just like that, but very similar in this feeling of like these like little gifts to God, right? And like what does that word even mean? I don't know. To me, it truly kind of feels like the collective. And so if like what you're doing is coming from this like loving place, truly like, even if it's just to make something pretty for the collective, like, yeah, I think that's like such a cool little node. Yeah, yeah.
especially with the internet, it's literally a node. You know, it's not even some abstract thing that you imagine, but like physical, something physical that, you know, if it can help at least one person, that's a win. And we've talked about that stuff.
Speaking of this, like since we just said all this, I want to show you this painting. So this is one I made for Hudson on his 6th birthday, but I recently like picked it back up and I was like making some extra like little touches and stuff to it. But you can see it's the Avatar Select screen, like from like Midnight Gospel to Avatar Select. It's kind of like me and him now as our little like avatars, and there's a lot of like different layers and stuff to that. But I had this inclination. It was like last week, and I just finished it the other day. But like to add in these little nodes and all the secret symbols and languages and stuff here in the background. But yeah, dude, these nodes, I made a whole YouTube video about it, but definitely one of the most impactful experiences of my life was this DMT experience where I met Lord Indra, the like Hindu deity, and he took me to Indra's net and saw that like collective, and it's a part of my like DMT tattoo sleeve and stuff here now. And yeah, dude, I think about that a lot, and it's sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard, kind of like what I was saying earlier with the evil, and like when I see someone who's evil.
For sure. How is it like, how do you handle having a kid, and obviously you're very out about this world, and like your son must see that you have like a mushroom, like how do you talk to a kid about that kind of stuff without like just trying to sell it to them, obviously, because you know you got to do that responsibly.
I don't. He's 7 right now. Me and him haven't had any conversations about drugs. I don't even think in his mind yet he conceptualizes. Knows what, like he knows like if like his nanner is like drinking a beer, right? He'll know. Like, but I don't think he knows like a beer produces like a psychoactive. I don't even think he's really, you know. But it's absolutely one day I will be having very intimate conversation with him about that. In no way trying to encourage him down any sort of certain path. But I think the issue that a lot of like children run into, I think a lot of the dangers is the lack of like transparency and education. So they have to kind of like find out the hard way for themselves. And also like I just showed you that painting that I made for him. And like I make him a painting every year on his birthday, for his birthday. And it's usually like this like kind of like, you know, there's a concept behind it, and there's like kind of like hidden messages behind it, and I like to think of, and this is a part and a big antithesis of like my whole being and the whole like Launchpad podcast and everything that I do is you know, sometimes I get this sense with psychedelic drugs that you know, like with God and a lot of different religions, and even some of the own experiences I've had, I get this inclination that like we're all one, we all come from the same source, but there is this intentional sort of like fractalization of things, maybe, and the reasons for that and things, but like I get this sense that it was in an attempt to return to love and to love myself more, you know. And I also get this sense with psychedelic drugs and with this reality that, and Terrence McKenna said this about DMT in particular, but he's like, if you were God, essentially, and you created this game where there was this built-in amnesic effect, and you agreed to that, he's like, but wouldn't you also spice things up? If you wanted to leave some sort of message for yourself, some sort of Easter egg to remind yourself of your true nature with this within this game of the amnesia, what better messenger than a chemical messenger, right? And so, like, I get this sense, and I could be wrong, I'm open to being wrong about this, but I get this sense a lot with psychedelic drugs that they're little gifts from God. I really associate them with that. Like, and I think that they're little Easter eggs that, like, we've left for ourselves. Like, I've left for myself, you know what I'm saying? And with the whole God being Father, the fractalization, so I can love myself further, I'm a child of God, I kind of truly feel that way. I feel like we all are. You know, I thought about this aspect with Hudson and like being a father, and I think part of the reason why I love it so much, why I'm so like it's the most important aspect of my life, is because I think it cuts to the core of what this life is all about in the first place. Because through him, you believe that he is whether I believe or not that he's a spiritual sort of reincarnation of myself, to some degree, to some sense, he is at least a physical reincarnation of myself, and he is a reincarnation of myself in which I get to love myself further, you know, love myself even more deeply and intimately, and understand myself even more, you know what I'm saying? And so like part of like the painting things, like I know I'm like the crazy fucking stoner dad, hippie dad guy, and I'm cool with being that, but like I'm leaving them like little Easter eggs, not because like, hey, you need to smoke DMT in this lifetime, or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but I'm leaving him like little Easter eggs,
Yeah.
and I love doing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and like part of the, like all the every time I make a podcast and put it out there and do anything like that, I truly do it with a sense of like, I fucking hope he watches this someday. Like, and
Yeah.
it's like, and it's proud of his dad. And like, and I think about like what I can give him as a father. I think one of the best gifts that you can give any human being is a good childhood. And I ask myself, like, how can I give him a good childhood, dude? I see so many guys, I see so many men caught in this rat race of like, and I get it. I also love to be the provider. I want to be the provider, kind of like what you're saying, protect what's yours. But I also get this felt like, yes, like I need to provide and I will provide. I do provide. But it's like that is like just a small sliver of like my responsibility and like bringing him up into this world. Like truly, if I want him to be a good man, and I desire that more than anything, not that I want him to be a good man, it's I desire more than anything for him to be happy and healthy. And I think for that, I have to actualize and embody that myself. You know what I'm saying? I think it necessitates that in a way. I take that back. I don't think it necessitates that. I do think through the transmutation of having bad parents, you can also become an amazing person. But yeah, dude, I fucking the whole interplay between everything that I've like lived through with incarceration and like DMT and the two being interlapped, the whole interplay with that, and also like being, became a father at 17. Um, dude, like it's through all this shit, like, yeah, dude, being a dad's been the biggest teacher for sure. Yeah.
That is so beautiful, so profound, man. And I think you're doing it right. And yeah, I also think about that too. Like sometimes when I'm making stuff, I'm thinking of like deep future. I'm like,
Yeah.
I might have descendants, my grandchildren and great grandchildren, who will be watching this right now. So
I
what's
had
up?
this come
What's up, guys?
yeah, what's up, guys, ancestors, everybody? I had this come true the other day, dude. So I released a video, it was like damn near 3 years ago now. It might be 3 years ago on the day. This is kind of weird. But I released this video talking about this experience that I had of smoking DMT while on ketamine, right? And the experience I had was very like white lightish, and like there's this whole thing. And people can go watch that video if they want to, but like it's not. I guess the context of that is that me and my business partner Christian were having this conversation on the phone, and he had some recent sort of like mystical insights, and was like juggling these different synchronicities and different crossroads. He's in the fucking next boy. He's in the game like we all are. He's a ninja, and I was like, dude, what you just said about this particular experience and like I was like, you need to go watch this fucking video I made 3 years ago. He's like, okay. So I sent him the link. And dude, it was like this. Me and him both watched. I watched it like right before I sent it to him, and I know like he watched it right away. He called me, and it's so hard for me to, and it would take forever, so I'm not going to explain why, like what within the video and everything resonated and made this like crazy. But it was like this time capsule, man. Like this time capsule, almost like I don't know, it felt like too good to be true and too synchronistic of like, I really did make a little time capsule for us to watch in this moment about this particular topic. And so, yeah, dude, I think that you're right. I think when you're making this shit, I think you are making like little cool, like little notes, like time, even for the collective and for yourself. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Well, cheers to that, man. Cheers to that. I love talking to you, bro.
I love talking to you too, man. Seriously, like one of my favorite human beings in the world to talk to. I've had a lot of like fun, interesting conversations in my life, but yeah, dude, I love talking to you, man.
Dude, for sure. We'll cross into the IRL realm one of these days, real life.
I think very soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like 2025 might be the year for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm really considering doing this thing because I'm trying to get this thing going of like Psychedelic Week. And I actually saw that Dennis is like involved in some like global psychedelic week, and I'm like, shit, all right. Like, I had the idea first, but it's cool, it's whatever. But I thought I'll make mine Psychonaut week. Cause did I ever tell you about this idea?
Dude, you were the one to do this. Like yeah, dude.
So
you haven't told me this idea, but please, dude.
Basically, I already had this concept of like a hippie holiday week because the place that my birthday falls. So April 19th is Bicycle Day. April 20th, 20. Then it's my birthday. and then it's Earth Day. So it always felt like this string of like hippie holidays, right? So I was
Yeah.
like, why don't I just turn this into a week? Like 420 is already like an annual celebration. So the idea is to make it a psychedelic week where every day we kind of observe different things, like Bicycle Day, 420, and then I found all these things that come in sevens, like the seven chakras, the seven hermetic principles, and try to make every day like based on that. So
Mm.
that's the
That's my
idea.
lucky number too. 7.
I love that number too. So my idea is I want to go to Cosm this 2025 for Psychonaut week and
Dude, we
like
could
do
like
something.
we could like really, and they seem like the type of, I don't have a relationship with either one of the Greys or anything, like, but from everything I've seen, I feel like they'd be like really open to some sort of like, hey, like collaboration, like, like, hey, we're really trying to like create a cool energy around this, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, I think that they would really get a kick out of that. And like, hey, we all have platforms, we've developed this little like mycelial network between us, and we're trying to
Yeah.
like spread that further and do this cool little project, and we think your spot would be a powerful place. I think they'd really get a kick out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
dude, that's a
that's
powerful idea, man. And
that's
that's
the
like the
plan.
mushroom thing you were saying earlier with the voices. It's like, dude, with ideas, it's like every day I make to-do lists. It's like how I structure my day. I wake up and I start writing like to-dos. I check them off and I write more to-dos, and I go through a to-do list, and like whenever I have an idea too, I use my notepads. I'll fucking like obsessively like, write it down like right away. I might even extrapolate on it, make its own page and stuff. But like, cause like an idea, dude, I've had ideas come and go, like truly like come out of like the ether and like actually disappear, where I'm like, fuck, like, what was that idea? It's like, and so yeah, sometimes I wonder like, do we, because I think there's sometimes like an optimal state I can put myself in where I might get like some more ideas, but sometimes they just do feel like little gifts.
Yeah.
And that's a cool idea that you had, is what I'm saying with all that.
Yeah.
It's a really cool little gift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it just kind of like appeared to me because of my birthday, and once I got into psychedelics, I was like, of course I'm noticing Bicycle Day and 420 and my birthday are all lined up. And so then when I started the channel is when I was like, okay, maybe I can make this something more public, I guess. So anyway, I was gonna start planning it out in January, and but I definitely want you to be there if that's possible, and maybe I can drive up to Kentucky on the way and come pick you up, and we go up to see Alex Gray.
Dude, yes. Another option is if we end up wanting to make like a camping trip or something like that,
Mm.
like people camping out there, I got a rooftop tent. So we could also take my
Mm.
car and crash my rooftop tent and stuff. Yeah,
Sick.
well, dude, yeah, we can really make that a fun trip for sure.
Cool.
I'm legitimately down. I obviously with Hudson and stuff, I would need like just a little bit of time to like plan forward and stuff. But like
Yeah.
I could probably make it happen, man, depending on the time of year and things like that.
Cool. Well, that's the rough kind of like plan. I want to try to do it in April, late
Cool.
April. So
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
we'll shoot some ideas around, but
Yeah,
yeah,
man.
that was a great conversation. I'm glad we got to do it again, and you got to come on my channel this time.
Yeah, bro. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I can appreciate it. Let's do it again
Yeah,
soon, man.
yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, man. Much love, brother.
Much love.